You better be listening to Sleazoids or I must break you.
Academy Award winner Christopher Walken. The Dogs of War.
The job pays $10,000.
15.
It's only a reconnaissance.
The Reconnaissance.
The reconnaissance is no good if you don't come back.
I always come back.
And you came back to the big city. My.
Of course it's them.
Right on our doorstep. Didn't you know that? Didn't you know we kept open house?
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Sleazoids, the podcast where we go down the rabbit hole of 20th century genre fare from the most influential canon classics to the trashiest exploitation films we can get our hands on and invite you to tag along in helping us create a canon of sleaze. Each week is a double feature grindhouse style where we discuss two films loosely related by subject, genre, actor, filmmaker, or franchise, and at the end of each episode along with our honorary Sleazoids, which you can become by subscribing on Patreon.
Next week, we're talking deadly dairy products and the magic of Clint Howard, so join the sleaze.
It's very true. We decided all the official, I haven't heard it described like that, all the official ratings and rankings of the film that we cover as well. Patreon subscribers also get an honor shout out and 2 bonus episodes every single month, which we have been doing for many years at this point. I don't even know how many bonus episodes there are, but there's hundreds of them, as well as our bonus transmission series where we talk about new release genre films as well, which we are getting ever closer to 100 of those, which we will at some point. So again, patreon.com/Sleazoids podcast if you're interested in that. And speaking of which, we have a bunch of people to give their shout outs real quick too. If I can just see the full names here. Okay, so we had Pleasure Mountain sign up at $5 a month. We had Botten, we had Chance, we had Jacob Gosfield, Jake B, Kevin Sayeg, Murray Mintz, Harry Likes Batman, Michael, Mac Gialicata, Normica, Daniel, Jake Peter, Berenger White, Arian Varma, Colin Estes, Dustinin, Beckett, David Jones, and last but not least, 2 last but not least, and 2 who signed up at the annual tier got a little bit of a monthly discounted rate by signing up for an entire year of the show. We had Henry and Derek E, who both did that. So thanks so much to all of you folks. Hope you're enjoying all those bonus episodes. We appreciate the support.
Yeah, thank you very much, everybody.
That's the one plug for the week. The other plug, as always, is Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you're listening on either one of those platforms, give us a good old rating and review over there. It helps us climb the ranks and find new listeners. And the last plug, as always, is merch. If you have yet to get your Sleazoids dad cap or the blowout-themed poster art shirt that we had designed by friend of the pod, Brendan Lim of Black Belt Cinema, the link is in the description of this episode, as well as over at sleazoidspodcast.com if you would like them. But that is it for the intro. Welcome back to another week. As always, I am your host, Josh Lewis, and joining me also, as always, is my co-host,
Jamie Miller. Welcome back, everybody.
Welcome. I believe 2 weeks ago would have been the last time you folks over here on the main feed would have heard from us, where we would have had special returning guest Cameron Feder of Podcast About List back on the show to once again go kaiju mode, because he is our monster movie correspondent, rubber suit correspondent, and we of course went back to the godfather of the kaiju movie with an Ishiro Honda double feature that did not involve Godzilla, actually involved Godzilla's first 2 buddies to get their own solo movies. We talked about Rodan from 1956 and of course Mothra from 1961.
Yeah, just incredible effects. Love watching a bunch of guys in puppets destroy a miniature set. It's so much fun. So we thank Cameron for that every time.
Yes, we had so much fun breaking that down with Cameron. And it actually perfectly set us up for what we wanted to do last week over on the Patreon feed, because obviously Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey is in theaters. And we were kind of feeling like we were in a bit of a sword and sandals fantasy mode. So we actually talked about 2 sort of classic films based on Greek mythology and featuring, of course, iconic stop motion animation by the legendary Ray Harryhausen. So we talked about Jason and the Argonauts from 1963 and Clash of the Titans from 1981.
Yeah, just both amazing adventure movies. Kind of weak on the lead characters, I think, a little bit, but it really doesn't matter when you have so many awesome sequences of mythic creatures attacking them.
Jamie was like, Jason and Perseus? Yeah, really?
Yeah, I don't think so. Okay.
Yeah, I prefer Zeus.
Yeah, just let Talos take over, that giant titan. That scene is amazing.
Dean is amazing. It's true. So again, if you haven't heard that episode, though, again, patreon.com/Sleazoids podcast. If you're interested in hearing us go Greek mythology, sword and sandals mode. But moving on to this week, we are once again joined by a very special returning guest. He is the co-host of the spectacular Blowback podcast, who are 6 seasons deep into their exploration of American empire around the globe. Did a most recent season on Angola and a mini series on U.S. and Israel called No Daylight, and have an upcoming 7th season, I believe, on Chile that comes out pretty soon here. That guest is Noah Kulwin. Noah, how you doing, buddy?
Doing great. How are you?
Good to have you.
I'm assuming you guys are thick in the minds of putting that new season together right now. So thanks for taking some time.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. It'll be out Christmas time. We're hard at work on it and other projects. And listen, I'm always happy to make time for Sleazoids and happy to talk about some very fun movies.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I can't remember actually what the last time you decided to bring on, when you were like, I'm gonna mix geopolitics in an action film, which I think has just become the usual formula. When I'm like, Noah shoots me a message, he's like, have you guys seen this before, done this before? And I'm like, oh, what is it? I look it up, and it's like an awesome actor in an action film, and it has something to do with the latest season you guys are researching.
That was true. Learning about like that, because our last season was about Angola, and learning that there was an action movie from the early 1980s inspired in part by Angola and directed by the guy who did the BBC Tinker Tailor. I was like, all right, I need in on this. And I got in on it, and it was terrific. And I remember getting in touch with you about it pretty quickly after.
Quick. So we've had this plotted really for a while. So what 2 films have you brought with you this week, and why did you pair them together?
So Dogs of War is the first one, and it is an amazing, amazing movie. I really, really love that one. It's directed by John Irvin, and it stars Christopher Walken, who plays an ex-mercenary, or rather a mercenary, who is his job is weighing on him, who is recruited by a shadowy group of businessmen to essentially do a coup on a country. And there's some twists. It's a bit of the first act has more, spy drama in it than the rest of it. There's a lot of procedural stuff, but it kind of blends all these elements together, has a great climax and payoff. And, Irvin, the guy who made it, made what I believe to be one of the greatest spy procedurals of all time, which is a big Men in Rooms movie or miniseries. And he is able to also infuse that kind of here. And it's just wonderful. And, Christopher Walken holds it down. Tom Berenger's in it. It's quite good. And then the second movie is from the end of the 80s. It's from, I believe it came out in the US at least in 1988. And it's called BELLMAN and TRUE. And it's essentially a soft father's rights bank heist movie. I kid only a bit. It's about a guy who is recruited by a group of criminals to betray his employer in his, computer bank security job to help them do a bank heist. And the action and the stakes kind of escalate alongside the heist, mainly because of the presence of this man's stepson, who he has taken responsibility for. And the absence of the wife is part of the plot of the movie, the story of the movie in many ways. It really is like a character study about this father and his son.
The son needs to learn to reject his deadbeat mother and
exactly
fool with his computer programmer.
He needs to kick that nanny state. He needs to kick this part. He needs to basically turn to. I mean, it's very Thatchery. There is like a very weird, like kind of funny reactionary strain to it that's of the time. It certainly feels like. However, and it's a very mean movie in that respect, which I admire. But then it has the heist sequence, which borrows from Thief. It borrows from, Rafifi certainly feels like.
Absolutely.
But it borrows from a bunch of different movies and makes something like really special and original and set in this like gritty 80s UK environment that is, to me, just very memorable. And one of the reasons I, wanted to bring that movie here is because I came across it almost by random in Powerhouse Films, and their Indicator Blu-ray series had released it, and like only in UK, and I have a Region B player, and I was like, all right, well, this looks interesting. And I was, I was hooked. It got me. And more people need to know about this movie. And my feeling is that if I'm able to talk about this movie publicly and get more people aware of it, that they will find a way to make it more available to people.
It's definitely
really
underseen. Only has 1,000 logs on Letterboxd, and so,
like it deserves an audience for how good it is.
I will say
exactly.
I will say, if you do have a VPN, you can get it on the UK Prime Video right now. That's how I found it at one point as well, because it is a little bit more difficult to find. I couldn't find it in Canada or the United States anywhere. So,
like, to me, this is a special. Like, if any, you know, it's a special movie. It has a lot of very complex moving parts, and it is slow. Like, it's like the first act is slow. It's again, like I emphasize that it's a character study, and it's a bit sappy, certainly. But you know, it's Handmade Films. It's the people who made Mona Lisa and Long Good Friday, and there is like a degree of craft and excitement in this that you know, is why I brought it here today.
Yeah, I feel like both films too have that kind of first half of a lead up, really sinking you into it so that the tension
first hour character study, second hour tense process heavy depiction of the professionals pulling off the job, even though the jobs are of course quite different. There is bank heist and there is like a black ops coup going on between the two of them. But no, structurally I think they make perfect sense as a pairing. And yeah, both are handsomely made by, like, you know, maybe guys you don't know the names of that much, just because they are kind of stately British directors who, you know, weren't necessarily auteurs, but definitely, you know, had a sturdy hand behind the camera. So yeah, I'm excited to jump into these here, and we're going to go chronologically here, and we're going to kick things off with John Irvin's The Dogs of War.
Tom Berenger. The bestseller by Frederick Forsyth. The Dogs of War.
All right, we are talking The Dogs of War, which obviously has a fantastic tagline and opening credits that riffs on Shakespeare's Julius Caesar. Cry havoc and let slip is how the title card goes before cutting to boom, The Dogs of War. You know, it's very sick, but it is the
Very awesome.
1980 mercenary war action thriller procedural directed by John Irvin, written by Gary DeVore and George Malko, who were loosely adapting the 1974 novel by Frederick Forsyth, and starring Christopher Walken and Tom Berenger as members of a small unit of mercenaries hired by a private corporation to liberate, quote unquote, a fictional African nation modeled after Angola, so that a wealthy British tycoon can essentially install a puppet regime and steal their natural resources. It is a tale as old as time. This is our second time talking about British director John Irvin, which I really wanted to highlight, because we had so much fun the last time we talked about him, and it was so long ago. But he began his career in the 60s in the world of political documentaries, shooting actual conflict footage on location in Algeria and Vietnam. In the 70s, he transitioned into television and got a lot of acclaim for his 1977 BBC miniseries adaptation of John le Carre's Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, starring Alec Guinness as George Smiley, which was so good it basically launched an eclectic movie career for him that included Hamburger Hill and Ghost Story. And funny enough, one of the first ever movies covered on this podcast, the bizarre, almost Italian Polizioteschi Arnold Schwarzenegger 80s American action vehicle Raw Deal, which came out actually 6 years after this. And we cover, no joke, I think it is the third or fourth episode of the show, and that episode is mostly us crying and saying quotes from the movie.
Yeah, I thought when Noah was first referring to the greatest spy movie or adaptation that Irvin did of all time, it might have been Raw Deal and Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Right, it was Arnold going undercover into the mafia.
I need you to understand the way my jaw dropped when I learned that the guy who did Raw Deal with Arnold was the Alec Guinness Tinker Tailor guy. Like, I'm telling you, like, it's He's a special talent. He really is. He makes a good movie. He knows how to.
And not only that, he makes a good looking movie. He's actually pretty good at handling action and destruction and squibs, which we'll talk about specifically here. But I remember when we talked about Raw Deal, we were like, dude, he got the DOP of Excalibur for that film. He got the editor Anvi Coates of Lawrence of Arabia for that film. Like, he was hiring really solid craftsmen to do like a trashy Arnold mob infiltration movie. Where he's like ripping around in a leather jacket to the Rolling Stones, firing a machine gun sticking out of like a broken windshield and shit like that. Like, he was like, it didn't matter what he was making. He was like, no, this is going to have nice framing. It's going to have nice slick camera moves. There's going to be some editing choices here. And when it gets time to do stuntcraft and blood squibs, oh boy, you know that this guy who's normally known for British guys talking in rooms is going to let loose.
Yeah, that movie is essentially the last like 20 minutes of this film for 90 minutes with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and then with this you get what I assume, I haven't seen it. I've seen the film, but I haven't seen the television adaptation. And I assume that's what you get with this deep character study and the procedural element of this film that goes on for much longer than I was anticipating, especially when I came into this knowing that the guy that did Raw Deal was doing this film. So,
Noah, how would you compare his shooting style on the Tinker Tailor series in comparison to some of the shooting style of here? Because they made them almost back to back. Like he did this like 1 year later.
So the way I would, it's there are two things. The first is location. Tinker Tailor almost entirely takes place in London, and the middle section of this movie, when they're assembling the gear for their coup, takes place in London. And then the parts that aren't in London in the first part of the movie are in New York City, which is as close to London as like a shooting environment as you get. So there's like a big difference that you can kind of, that people might assume from the jump of like, oh, well, he's like action movie versus, character driven, sort of slow spy drama. But a lot of it is like these tense conversations in apartments and closed rooms in cities. And that is actually like, he's quite good. Because in TV, TV is a dialoguist medium. And so the script and how, it's, so much of the Tinker Tailor, what makes it so astonishing is how gripping it is, but so much of it is one person in a conversation with another explaining something that happened. And you're still like wrapped with attention. And so a lot of like how the tension has to build then, right? In like these moments when you do have the actors together, whether, it makes the physicality of it in the moments that you are doing, like showing action and demonstrating stuff like that much more important. And so how does that show, how that shows in the spy drama, right, is, it's these like little moments in between and people are talking to each other that just sort of color, like how Smiley rubs his eyes and how he talks to people, how he gently smiles, how he's an active listener. Like these things all sort of reflect really, really well, and how Irvin is, also obviously on Alec Guinness, an incredible actor, but like Irvin understands how you summon drama out of just like out of two dudes talking. And then in Dogs of War, like Christopher Walken, before, he, undergoes like a pretty savage fucking beating in a prison, before he, does a bunch of war stuff. I mean, the movie opens with war stuff, but a lot of it is like essentially like, it's like very domestic. It's actually closer to what he's done in The Deer Hunter, where he plays like this unstable guy whose like military service has like haunted him and has made it impossible for him. It's a closer to a performance in line with The Deer Hunter in that way. But it is, I think, more generally, a movie about this guy who has like these kinds of, like, relatable domestic destabilizing problems or manifestations of his war trauma or whatever.
Yeah, and that was the stuff in this movie, I got to be honest, I was not expecting of it, because I've always looked at this poster, I hadn't seen it before, The Dogs of War, Christopher Walken holding a smoking grenade launcher, and it was by the guy who made Raw Deal. So my brain
adapting,
was like,
by the way, like the hyper procedural, the author of like one of the hyper procedural thriller adaptations of all time, The Day of the Jackal, in Frederick Forsyth.
Totally,
It's like
that was
also
where I
like
was
a
gonna
very plot heavy book.
Yeah, that was where I was going to bring it back to, because like this is, him doing a man on a mission war film in a way. And so that was the register I was expecting. And it does get there, but it does get there in a very deliberately paced, much classier kind of patient affair on the process and the soullessness of this actual Black Ops work that this character is doing. And realizing he was the Tinker Tailor guy made sense. Realizing that, yes, also he was adapting this journalist turned author, Frederick Forsyth, which the last time we talked about him, it was for Day of the Jackal, which we covered with Will Menaker, where we went all over the fact that he really embedded himself in the 60s with the French president, who, granted the Algerian independence from France, and, had all these assassination attempts against him. And so, incorporating those experiences into this very procedural heavy novel that is that became this assassination conspiracy thriller movie by High Noon director Fred Zinnemann. We were comparing that movie to something like Army of Shadows or like a Costa Gavras thriller and stuff like that. And so realizing the collaboration here, where if you go, oh, Frederick Forsyth and the Tinker Tailor guy, I would have been more prepared for what this movie was. And I kind of realized that midway through watching it, where I was like, oh, it's not quite like Day of the Jackal, which has more of like a paranoia noir-y kind of crime thriller. Like it's from that 70s era of like Clute and Marathon Man and All the President's Men. This is definitely harkening back a bit to like those 60s Men on a Mission movies. So I was thinking more something like The Dirty Dozen or like Where Eagles Dare. Obviously the burgeoning war action film like Apocalypse Now or Deer Hunter.
It's not as dark as the movie I'm about to compare it to, but it is, especially because of like how the story of War, Dogs of War resolves. But like, it reminds me more of like Southern Comfort, which is one of my favorite
I see that.
movies.
Yeah, totally.
Because I think that they are like, I think that part of what they are more about, like, so for one thing, Dogs of War is literally about like, the Dogs of War is a movie, right, that is about like the situation in Africa, like a coup, and this guy who is from America who's going there. But indirectly, what it is, as are many of the movies involving like war at this point in time, right, it's actually about Vietnam. And the people who are characters in it, particularly mainly the protagonist, in this case, Christopher Walken, he is a Vietnam figure. He is which is also to say, like, this is some of the historical truth that this movie is rooted in, which is that in the mid 1970s, the mercenaries who were tasked with going to fight wars in Africa, particularly the American ones who were around, which was not the plurality of them by any means. That was more of a European thing. But the American mercenaries who were on the market, these were the kinds of places they ended up in. And these are the kinds of conflicts they were in. But where did they get their training? What was like their crucible, right? Like, it wasn't, I know they're on a spec ops mission in Latin America in the opening of this movie, but originally it's about Vietnam. And so this movie is actually, like, in some measure, it's a Vietnam movie by proxy, I would argue.
Totally.
Just that, like,
I mean,
original,
that was why you pointing out the connection to the Deer Hunter. I mean, Michael Cimino was asked to, direct this and did a draft of it at one point after Don Siegel and Norman Jewison ended up passing on it. So I'm 90% sure Christopher Walken is involved in this movie because of that relationship. And that was why they wanted, like, the Deer Hunter was like the biggest Vietnam War drama at that time. And they were like, here, we want people to, remind them of that. But what if we put that Christopher Walken character, through some of that domestic experience he has, especially in the first half, but then we push it to a bit of a more extreme direction that adheres a little bit almost to like a movie that reminds me of like an Oliver Stone movie. I was thinking of that James Woods one where he gets involved in the Salvadorian Civil War.
Oh, yeah.
Salvador.
Yeah.
That feels like kind of what half. Christopher it feels like what Christopher Walken's character does in this. He goes here, he experiences the on the ground thing, then he comes back, and when he comes back you get the climactic set piece of them actually pulling off the job, which is the only point in the movie, probably the last 20 minutes or so, where it basically does go full Rambo 2. It's even shot by cinematographer Jack Cardiff, who famously shot the gorgeous Technicolor Powell and Pressburger films, The Red Shoes and Black Narcissus, and eventually shot Rambo 2 in the 1980s, which was fucking crazy. I remember when we talked about that, we were like, dude, the reds of the red shoes are all over Stallone here. And also we talked about one of the few times Jack Cardiff directed was actually a Mercenaries in Africa, Men on a Mission exploitation movie as well, called Dark of the Sun, which we did as a pairing with Eastern Condors, I think just sometime last year. And so Cardiff was like someone who, you know, weirdly, despite his art house credentials, he was someone who very regularly filmed sweating guys blowing up foreign countries.
Well, so this is where like Southern Comfort is that as well. Like it's a Man on a Mission movie of sweaty guys blowing up stuff, except they're like the Louisiana National Guard. And it's not Vietnam, although if you saw the movie from a glance, anybody would think that that's what it is. And like, there's a very, you know, Walter Hill, who made it, is an incredibly talented and he's one of the GOATs of all time. And so he doesn't really establish the Vietnam connection outside of like really much more than like a throwaway, an amazingly written throwaway line about like shooting protesters like a few, early on in the movie. And so I think that there is one of the ways in which I would process the Dogs of War, then I guess, like, the upshot of all that being that it is like kind of also a Vietnam movie and it's grafted onto this Africa storyline. But like, that's, I think, one of the things that makes it, more sociologically interesting, or let's say like it's one of the things that gives it a bit of character, because it is like all of the domestic scenes and everything are more or less just like, yeah, it could just be, they could just be talking about Vietnam. And it's
they literally could be taken from the Deer Hunter. Like when it goes from like that opening cold open that you already mentioned, where it's like them being bombshelled as, Christopher Walken's Jamie Shannon is his name. His mercenary is trying to, get his men across the battlefield and get to the plane in time, which they hijack and take seats from. Like it seems like local civilians or at least people who are members of the government who is being mercenarily kicked out at that time that they were clearly supporting in some capacity, and it's huge explosions, bombastic score. It's the kind of movie I think you probably expected when you tuned in. But then it immediately goes to this almost like Godfather-esque looking baptism sequence, and from there it's probably about an hour of him like being sad and like drinking beer and watching TV in his apartment,
and like trying to get back with his ex and like show that he's not like a shitbird and that he's not like a violent psychopath. But
even though every drawer or fridge he opens up has a gun in it because he's so paranoid.
And that's like part of like one of the things that the movie like does a good job of too, of being like, it's not like just total shoot and cry territory, because it's like no, like you're a fuck up. It's ruining the lives of like the actual human beings in your life, which are this woman and your child. And like, it's only like the worst people that encourage these impulses. Now, again, like the movie, I think ultimately goes like in a pretty Hollywood direction, but like the premise as it's set up and like what I think the viewer gets for the bulk of this movie is a depiction of like Christopher Walken as like, oh wow, you're just like a huge like fuck up who's also frankly not that good at his job. At least in the first part of the movie 45. He's not.
Yeah. They show him fail in the first 45 minutes when he gets called to do the initial mission to go back, and he acts as a bird watcher. He gets caught. He gets tortured. He gets beat up.
He like basically
he
like shows up and he's like, "All right, I am the most obvious spy you've ever met. I'm not really gonna hide it." It's actually, you know what it reminds me of a lot. Only what I've seen from the trailer of that new Martin McDonagh movie with John Malkovich and Sam Rockwell. About like, it's another hitman in a funny place movie. But like John Malkovich, like they're just like they're like CIA guys who are or like CIA hitmen who are just like incapable of keeping their cover. And like that is like what like Chris Wong is like, hey.
He does seem to have this like confidence within his character that comes from probably doing it so many times and thinking that he's gotten away with much more already. And because I do feel like he's very nonchalant about everything and not trying too hard to keep it under wraps. And then, I mean, it doesn't work out for him whatsoever. Irvin's direction, even talking about those first two scenes, I love that he has like fluid camera work that pans along them driving towards the plane, and there's all these explosions. But then immediately after, when he is doing that baptism scene, the camera's kind of just floating along with the entire family circling them, and you get a glimpse of everybody's personality a little bit just in these small moments. and then having Walken renounce Satan. And
I like that. I was going to highlight that.
Yeah,
too.
I love that. And
it was like, of course I renounce Satan.
Yeah, exactly.
Immediately has a meeting with a businessman who offers him the reconnaissance job to scope out this nation, and specifically because they were like, look, he's a dictator and there's some brutal conditions going there, but more importantly, we can't invest in a madman.
Right.
We can't do any business there. That's why we're upset about it.
Well, there is like, to me, a kind of this is like a very 70s movie quality of this thing, where it's the like I'm reminded of like John Huston and Winter Kills, this kind of like really like avuncular evil guy in the shadows, like organizing stuff, which is a pretty good trope. I enjoy it.
I do think creepy quality. Well, time.
And it's also it is, I think, meant to be like one of the things that's also right. Like when you look at a movie from this time, and just like we're sort of evaluating what is different in 2026 versus 1981, the class difference between people who fought in wars and people who did multinational wheeling and dealing, like, was pretty substantial, right? Like somebody like Christopher Walken's character, he lives in a working class setting. He has working class problems. He went to a war and is like largely dealing, as we understand it, with like, from the perspective that like, he's like a prole who has more or less been diverted into like a lifetime of like death dealing internationally. And the dislocation that he experiences is not like, just the classic alienation from your labor, and or the like the the exploitation that he faces as like a worker in a normal context. It's this much more different. It is a different kind of thing. And one of the ways that like we see it come into relief in this movie is that like this guy who's always looking kind of dirty and he's never living in a clean place is like dealing with this very dandy, rich, evil force. And like yes, there's a bit of like foppishness to it that reads now as like kind of like, oh, that it's a little like it's a ridiculous. There's an evilness, there's a creepiness to it, but there is like a foppishness there. And I think that to me, part of what is like heightened in that moment, particularly in the hands of somebody like Irvin, who exploits this kind of similar representation, I think in Tinker Tailor, like it is also, it's like, Walken is made to feel like this guy who is like, yeah, he's going to be taking orders all his fucking life. And part of that is because he comes from the class of people and he's represented as such who does that. And so that is also sort of like one of the, I won't say like pressure cooker qualities of this movie, but it's like one of these like pressures that is put on this guy that is, also like a thing about him that is, one of the elements that like, again, like when the movie ends how it does is sort of like you see how that pressure built on him throughout this movie.
Yeah,
early on he's reluctant, right? Like I think that's an important quality of him, is that he actually doesn't want to take the job. He turns down the job, and he later accepts it because he's like, oh, I could actually use this money to then call my ex-wife and see if like this is enough money for us to like start that life we always wanted to start, that but because he literally can't bring himself to call her down on his luck with no money, and so like that's the only reason he does the job. And then the reconnaissance job itself, going obviously south and brutal and violent towards him, obviously is also just reconfirms that he wants to leave. And the thing I found fascinating about the movie is that he's pretty quick to be like, oh, my ex-wife wants nothing to do with me actually, and I actually have like pretty much nothing to live for here.
Yeah, I'll take the job.
Time to call up the boys. Let's just get it done,
Yeah, him saying I'm willing to quit for a normal life feels like one of the most truthful things that his character says and does to anybody going throughout these deals and all of this procedural element.
It's funny though. I disagree.
I think that
his wife has his number. I think that she knows that he is like, what I would argue is that like he's been
I think
deformed.
He believes it. I just think that she sees the fact that he's not going to amount up to that. But I think that in that moment he really believes it himself, even though I think everything that we've seen also prior and implied
maybe
about his history.
I think that he's kind of tortured because like he knows that he's not, ultimately that like he chooses the path of the warrior and not that of like the human being. And a big reason that, we know that is because like the time that when he's at the point of like total liberation, what does he choose to do? He chooses to go back to war. Now, the question that I think, and this is part of what makes this a real Vietnam movie, is that like it poses the question, which is, would this person have become a killer had they not gone down this path? And like, sometimes that question is interesting. Sometimes it's more of the shoot and cry variety, where it's just like it's like sort of like a cause and effect melodrama, which I don't especially care about. But I think in this movie, it's more like where it becomes kind of interesting is that nobody really asked that. And instead we're kind of like more in media res, and we're presented at the point at which like his wife is like, oh, no. This isn't like, you don't have a choice in this. I'm telling you, like, I don't want you near me. Like you're like a violent psychopath. And so it's just like taken as a fact that like, oh, well, this guy has that. And so, again, like I do think that the climax of this movie ultimately, like it goes to a Hollywood place for how, this question of like, well, what is the guy who chooses the path of the blade? Like, what does he do? What does he do with his life?
And even after
he picks up the grenade launcher, baby.
And even after this happens with his wife and he decides to go back to the war essentially and be a mercenary full time, there is a lot of conversation, and specifically one conversation where they're talking about the budget that they're given. They're given about $1 million to do the job once he assembles the team. And one of the major things that they say is that they want to spend as little as possible so that they can just take as much as they can from this budget rather than spend it on the actual mission, heavily implying that all 5 of them are struggling. And I think they even get some of these guys from, blue collar jobs like mechanic work and things of that nature. So, they're not necessarily rolling in the dough, and it's a very essential part of their
I will say,
thinking.
I absolutely loved his boy Drew, played by Tom Berenger, who is awesome in the film, has a sick mustache, is more concerned with beer and pizza at the meeting than the actual plan when they're first putting it on. And when he signs up, there's a bit where he, like Walken is kind of collecting the old crew together, like De Niro and Heat or something like that. And there's a guy named Terry, played by Ed O'Neill, who turns them down. And it's this great split diopter shot where he's effectively like, dude, I can't do that anymore. And Drew kind of starts talking shit about him a little bit, and he's just like, dude, like you also have like a wife and like she's pregnant, and like aren't you gonna do like what? Why aren't you staying? And he's basically just like, I can't really. He gives the action is the juice like kind of excuse, or he's just like, I'm totally into it, man. Let's just go. Let's just have some sick fun. And later on, he's literally like shirtless with aviators, fucking just ripping into the ocean, having the time of his fucking life.
And he's the character that hoots and hollers when the action starts and they start killing everybody too.
Totally.
And he kind of gets his just desserts for that in a very specific moment.
And I think that's a pretty like, it's not like a total like Hollywood, it's like certainly not like a canon film, because there is like this kind of like when people are allowed to go like, a little Bill Paxton with it or something, there is this like it has the feeling of like, oh, this guy's going to get punished later. It's not, there's not like it's not like feel good color or just like a character bit for an action movie. It does feel it's one of the reasons why this movie is enjoyable. Like I'm not going to say that like it's like a movie with a grenade launcher for Mensa members, but like it is like it does have like more to it than the
I mean I honestly I personally like the idea that you can show someone like a domestic scene that almost seems like it should be in something from The Deer Hunter, where he's talking about like this guy has a normal job and he's got a wife and all of this, and that guy inside can actually truly could be part of a canon set piece at the end of the movie and be like, this is in him. He is capable of doing this for the right price. And like, there is a quality there where these guys do get a sense of liberation out of it, even if it is in this, very dark and grim fashion. And Walken obviously feels it less. Walken gets very stoic and very stern-faced and kind of bug-eyed. It delivers, I think, a really fantastic performance. I think especially during that stretch when he's poorly infiltrating, as you guys have highlighted. There are some moments where like he's a little bit more impressive. I did actually think that one
in the second
part
half, it feels like, when he's doing the operation.
I thought that one part was clever when the one of the sort of like regime generals in the African country tries to confront him about the fact that for his really, really poor cover as a nature photographer who takes photos of birds, and there's this really extended sequence of like, you know, they were like, dude, we know you're not a nature photographer. They have some driver like drive him to the middle of the jungle and say, there's birds here, man, now shoot. And he's so angrily just going around snapping photos being like, I am wasting my fucking time. Why did they're making me prove that I'm this nature photographer? And when he gets back to the bar later where he's hanging out with some of the other like journalists and some of the ways that the regime is making some of the foreigners basically stay in one hotel lobby in sort of one stretch of the major capital city of Clarence there, the one general comes up to him and it literally questions him about the scientific name of birds, and Walken literally has to like access his mind palace and go in there and start being like, I know the names of all these fucking birds because I researched this as part of my character identity before I came here.
But the beauty of the whole exercise is that even though he technically answers the question, everyone knows what he's really there for.
Totally.
You know, to do some like ulterior things.
Like having the information is great. The actual performance he gives to everyone is still incredibly suspicious. Like everyone there knows who he is.
And, you know, he has, I think like this is one of the movie does the like good job of sticking to the Forsythy thing of, you know, all of these procedural elements that like he has to study his cover and like we see him studying his cover.
I love that scene of him getting frisked for his alcohol and his cigarette and like the penthouse, the guy taking the airport tax, like how like that scene is obviously not unique, but how long it was and how long it's like, is this guy going to just arrest him on the spot here?
This movie does have a lot of moments that are like that thing that goes viral periodically, that clip from Columbo. That's just like TV used to have all the time in the world. And it's like a 45-second shot of Columbo walking down a hallway to make like a 2-second call on a payphone. You know, like this movie does have some of those moments, which is, I mean, it's great. And it also, you know, to your point about what you were saying earlier and how much Walken feels like he's holding up the movie at sometimes in a good way. Like he can carry this, like, you know, he has that quality. So when you see like the guys like gather in a room to organize the guns and go over the plan or whatever, and he's like framed at the center of it, it works, you know, it's in the same way that like it works when, you know, like James Caan is doing it in like Godfather 1 or something. Like you have like it feels like it works. Like it's not forced. It doesn't feel chintzy.
Yeah, there's something about Walken in that scene too that he's got the frustration comes to the surface with him very easily, even when he's answering them. I remember after every single scientific bird name he gives, he also says right, as if he's like, am I being tested, motherfucker? Like it's like this really aggressive way of going about it, rather than just saying like, yeah, I love birds and I'm a professional researcher and blah 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 blah. So it just feels aggressive off the
and what it takes like 2 seconds for like the early part of the film being him sort of like guided around the capital city and being like shown the restaurants and the church and the streets and wearing this like nice like casual travel wear, like he's on vacation snapping photos and all of this. And it's like the second day where he takes like that one photo of the you know, sort of the colonel's mistress who is trying to like warn him about the time that he's spending there so that he can take a photo of stuff he's not supposed to be taking a photo of. The like a few hours later, he goes out at night in operator mode with like the black war paint and the hoodie.
Yeah, he does the like, it's sort of like he just like kind of like puts on like, he might as well put on like a neon reflective vest and like just like run.
It's great. Like he is caught, arrested, and beaten within an inch of his life within about like 30 seconds of screen time of him actually trying to like pull this.
You know, which is like a great, like, I think also true thing of, you know, how people have this imagination of like, oh, these guys are always such good infiltrators and operators. No, he gets caught and then he gets sent to prison where he meets, and this is like the weak part of the movie, is like he meets
the
a doctor who's like a a political prisoner who's like the good guy, who's like, who's like the good middle professional class dissident with a presumably Western education or something, who wanted better for his people. And because he wanted better for his people, he's now in prison. And, because also like this fictional African country, Zangaro, that they've attacked, like, it's, there's like fictional country syndrome with these kinds of things where it's like, you don't have to deal with like any of the typical questions that animate like the real life versions of these things, right? Which have to do with like tribal or ethnic loyalty. So like in Angola, for example, like that's more or less like there are ideological valences to the different factions. But in Angola, it was also like it did break down along like ethnic or tribal lines, however you want to put it. And certainly like that just doesn't come up here. And so instead,
here it's literally just like crazy fascist man and like nice doctor.
And it's like it's like a Far Cry video game.
And the people just voted for the crazy fascist man. That's all that happened.
It really is like a Far Cry game. Like it's I really don't think it's too much deeper than that. But it's
that's not what it spends its procedural time on. What it's a lot more interested in terms of like that, like where it gets into the nuts and bolts, is the actual process of pulling a coup off, which is where I think this movie is at its strongest. Like, so when it gets into that,
which is fortunately the next thing, because he goes to prison, he gets mauled, his face gets turned into like a cut up potato.
The prosthetic on his face is grisly.
It's really nuts.
They fuck his face up.
And his recovery time is pretty impressive. That did seem like a situation where like the people who did the face fuck up like stuff went a little hard, and so then like his swelling comes down like quite quickly in the next few scenes. But then, he gets approached.
It's just such a good doctor. It's all it is.
He goes back to New York and he gets approached, and then he tries to get back with his wife, and she's like, fuck you, like some violent psycho. And the tycoon's rep comes back and is like, so how about getting a gang? The recon mission didn't work out. That's a shame. What if you got a group of mercs? And Walken's like, he says no, then the wife thing happens, then he says yes. And that's when like the movie kind of kicks into gear as like the coup plotting procedural, where it's about like getting freighters and getting bullets and having the guns ready. And
I love this stuff. This
so
was like I love any scene where wordlessly you're like, your mind goes, why is this guy like blowtorching a barrel right now? And then you're like, oh wait, he's gonna stuff the munitions inside the barrels that they put on the freighter. And then like a movie that operates in that kind of like, Melvillian way, and also throws in some tense like kind of French connection-y, like guys following each other, spying on each other, eventually killing each other.
And there's like a couple, like he made, so when he was doing his like recon mission and posing as a photographer, he met and became friendly with this like journalist.
Yes,
who then is like figures out that like you're up to something, and like kind of accosts him in London. And so the tycoon then goes after the journalist, and like it creates, like what's building is this conflict that Walken has with his employers, and he's like very curt with them, and he meets the guy whom they want to install to replace the current guy. The only visible difference that the audience has between like the guy whom the tycoon wants in power versus the present dictator.
It's literally the name. It's Colonel Kimba versus Colonel Bobby, and you get the Walken character.
Well, no, and Bobby wants to do business. Bobby wants to do business, so it's which is like, all right, like that's good to know. And Walken puts together this like you get it, like he's like there's and this is where I won't say that the coup plan is accurate, because like if we're planning coups, right, like it's never just like a cut off the head, the body will wither kind of thing. Like it's you have to do like a few things at once, and also you need like a foreign power typically that will help you or recognize you in some capacity. And there's like, all right, we're not getting that, we're getting the corporate thing, fine. And really what they do is like, they plan like, like a big raid on like the presidential palace, and they're going to go at the main guy. And it's like, okay, like it's
they
like
also
believable.
Murk that fucking journalist I want to highlight too. They run that motherfucker over with a car.
When I say
dummy
shot
in his car.
he gets, and then like Walken is like so angry that his bosses did that he then goes and kills the hitman who killed the journalist.
and puts his body in at his desk so that when that great shadowy moment where he turns the lamp on while answering the phone call with his boss, like the shadowy boss on his end, and he doesn't even acknowledge it while he's on the other end. That's a great moment. Also, him being like, "Don't worry, he's expendable," when he realizes that Walken has a very distasteful look towards Bobby because he's like, like there's so many great little moments in here.
It's actually, that line is delivered when the camera's on Bobby, so it's said while like the guy of it is like off screen, so it's truly just like a great little button. And then, you know, like the operation and like the raid, it's like this strategic attack, and that part is kind of realistic in that it's like, you know, these kinds of countries, like you'll need to do some other stuff in the periphery. You need like the military behind you, but like if you have like a well-organized group of people, like, you know, it's not like the worst plan in the world. The thing is that because this is this movie, it's like the wildest set piece you ever did see. Like, it's, you know, explosions galore. It's very impressive.
Mm-hmm.
Hell yeah. I'm not going to ding it for inauthenticity points on if it means that I get to get some more crazy squibs and explosions going on.
And it's, you know,
an hour and a half of procedure. It's time for the explosions,
now,
baby.
And you get some justice. Like Tom Berenger's, you know, dirtbag, you know, gets what's coming to him. There is like you get the texture of like, oh, they're child soldiers. Oh, this is like not such an ethical, like a conflict that had largely been abstract until this point, like concretizes rather vividly between the fires. And, you know, it's actually, you know, we were talking, you know, another movie that's a bit relevant and has this kind of third act or climactic revelation that's, you know, playing in theaters right now, The Odyssey. We get a sense of like, oh no, this is like very exciting and it's very tense, but also like it's kind of bad and grimy. Horrible. And you know, people are, you know, like there's dead bodies everywhere by the end of it. Like they're just shooting, you know, it's like grenade launchers, machine guns. It's like dead body, dead body, dead body, dead body. And they and to Irvin's credit, like he sets it up so that when the smoke does clear, like you do see like a sea of bodies.
That shot's wild. Big wide shot. Yeah.
How much death he displays afterwards. And he even mentions prior when they're setting things up about how even at one point Kimba was spooked by a possible assassination and executed 9 people. So even something along the lines of a fear of an assassination reverberates to so many people in the country. And so there's risk even attempting anything that you would see as good. And we already know that this isn't good to begin with. It's just replacing one dictator with another. It's just, except the other is connected to a corporation.
With a Western interest.
So it's it feels like he's constantly.
But I just found that stress pressure between the dynamics of them, where it's like Walken, like clearly this is what he does, and it's obviously disturbing when we see the results of it. And at the same time, he feels differently about the fact that he's the boots on the ground guy who has to live with this stuff, or at least has to actually deal it out. And so he has a weird tension with the guys who are paying him. And so like that's where you get the, if you want to call it sort of like the Hollywood catharsis of the movie, which is that you get, you know, this very, very elongated procedural sequences of them gathering the resources, them gathering the arms, them, you know, courting these political, you know, exiles from the country to be where he even gives them the big speech where he's like, I'm doing the tactics and we will give you support, but this is your battle that you guys are going to do. And then letting them loose on like the nighttime, like Bay of Pigs-ish, like beach raid sequence, which at first I will admit, it kind of just plays off like satisfying payoff to all of this buildup, because that's the logic of film language. Sure. That is like when they're first doing it, and it's like the night vision and the rotating lighthouse light, and there's like that tense bridge crossing bit. There's this weird, like, we're finally seeing these, you know, wheels of motion hit. What's amazing is that I think Irvin understands that. He has command of that. He's realizing that there is a weird catharsis that's coming out of this, finally, this explosive payoff. But when it finally hits, that pyrotechnic quality takes on also the destruction and the fiery haze and then the bodies accumulating, and all of a sudden you kind of go, damn, maybe Tom Berenger with like the aviators and the ascot ripping a grenade launcher and hooting and hollering does come at some kind of expense. And that was where it reminded me of something more like Peckinpah-ish, or more accurately actually Alex Cox's Walker. That was a movie I thought about a lot, just because of the way that it frames at night, like the fire and him walking through it. And, you know, that's another movie about American empire, like the psychotic destructive behavior, and how it gets realized in this, you know, destruction heavy filmmaking fashion as well. So that was what I found so interesting about like the last major set pieces. At once, it gives you like the fuck yeah, we finally hit the war movie shit, but at the same time you go, and maybe it gives a slap on the wrist also.
And he does it with like he gets a lot of the like the rousing speech, you know, like this is your war and stuff. Like there's a degree of verisimilitude, like it is like believable in the sense that like, you know, if you had been, I love the Bay of Pigs reference because I think that's exactly right. Like if you had been on the beaches, or rather on the, you know, on the boats before they land at the beaches, and you're like listening to what they would say to those guys on that doomed mission, this is what they would say. That's
their perspective on how this went down.
This mission went differently though. Like, you know, at the end of all this bloodshed, it clears, and it's you know, it's a real, like it really is like a crazy body, you know, like bodies everywhere on the ground. You know, the mercs are sipping champagne, you know, smoking cigars.
Yep.
There's a, you know, handful of them. Like they've pacified everybody. And then so like this tycoon's rep comes down with, you know, his walking stick accompanied by Colonel Bobby, and they go in and they get to the main office, and then who's there? It's Shannon, the walking character, and his friend from the prison, the doctor who was the good dissident. And Shannon essentially is like, aha, here's the twist. Like you're under arrest, Bobby. And this guy is the new president. And then, you know, they're like, what? And then, you know, Bobby starts to make a fuss, and
they were like, this whole country's bought and paid for. And he's like, yeah, well, you're going to have to buy it all over again.
And then blam,
says, you have to deal with this guy now.
And he takes out Bobby. He shoots him through the dome. And
that was the part that felt a little revisionist Hollywood to me, where I went like, the idea that the Walken character through his crisis of conscience also has like this heroic moment of being like, yeah, installing a puppet leader for business interests is wrong, so I'm gonna actually give this country a good leader. And I was like, I don't know that this guy would think that way.
I think it's to
me as if it would work like that too. Like you would like this higher government isn't gonna now just absolutely murder.
This is the movie. The movie that I think is probably closest to what the reality of this would be is Syriana, and what happens to George Clooney in that movie, because it's like, yeah, if you try to like break away and like do the right thing, like we know what'll happen to you. Don't like pretend like you can walk away from this.
Walken and his buddies don't drive away. They're in an unmarked grave somewhere. Like,
yeah, exactly. Well, only Tom Berenger dies, and that's because he's like the crudest one. I think in general, this movie is like, it's a good, pretty serious, hard-hitting movie with like a realistic look at all of this stuff, all of these themes. People feel like they're making real decisions. The emotions are believable. And even like the thinness of the coup is kind of forgivable, and the country setting, like, fine, I don't mind. It's, you know, it's a setting. It's not disrespectful, especially, but, you know, it's a good setting. But then like the last like few minutes, I'm like, okay, this is a little... I feel like what the interesting things that Irvin and the script were able to set in motion earlier in the movie just kind of like ride off into the sunset.
It did clarify for me that like really the only two easy notes it hits are the scene with the doctor in the prison and the scene at the very end. I think if you just found a different way to you did something differently with those two scenes, we're talking about a movie that I think is a lot more known. Because I think those are the only things that ring just a little false in comparison.
That's
to the
a good
rest
way
of
of putting it.
Strong.
I think for me, it would have been like the doctor character shouldn't have just been like goodness incarnate. Like he should have probably also represented like a faction of people. I don't know, like something to give you a sense of like who are the people of this country. And, you know, but again, like you're making up a country. This stuff is always kind of tricky in that setting because like the country is, as we, you know, it's a vehicle for the procedure. It's a vehicle for like the foresight of it all.
And for that crazy silhouette shot of all four of them breaking into the compound with just nothing but fire in the background as they are just like ripping grenade launchers everywhere.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
It feels as if to have one representation of just kind of the average citizen. It's the the girl that gives Jamie Shannon a tour when he first arrives, and she says something along the lines of, "I don't do anything by choice. I do it all due to circumstance.
It's the one person he doesn't kill in the final set piece who he runs into, because he just mercilessly, stoically, basically murders every single African person he comes into contact with until he gets to the colonel's bedroom and sees her and realizes that she was clearly trying to survive.
Yeah. But yeah, she feels like one of the only characters that kind of represents that. I suppose the Doctor does, but I don't feel like we get enough time with him to feel like what he really truly represents for the country. It just feels like they go, he'd be better, so we're putting him there, and that's that. That's good.
And Christopher Walken's like, I agree.
yeah, exactly. Don't think his character's thinking much past that. He thinks he did a good thing.
Enjoy Power. I'm going home with my buds, even though one of them is a corpse, but everybody goes home, as we said.
Well, and then it's like, and the movie ends, and it's like, that's kind of it. Like it's unsaid. It's the only. It's the real bum note of the movie. And look, like, ending movies is the hardest part of them. I'm always saying this. True. And I feel that, like, in general, I would recommend this. I think that if, like, you were looking for like a Saturday night action flick, you know, kind of thing, like, this is a great part of a double billing. I also think that it's the rare movie about a fictional country that watching it will actually illustrate like a semi-historical truth about like the kinds of things that people were up to at a, you know, rough area of the globe at a point in time. And I also think that it is like, look, like, John Irvin made some of the best television that's ever been made, like, ever, like, truly. And
honestly, I gotta be honest. I think his movies are underrated.
His movies are. I agree with you completely.
We thought Raw Deal was good, like meat-headed action film. This is a much more intelligent and interesting one. And those are the only two movies of his that I've actually seen. And I'm like, so far, I'm like, John Irvin had a steady hand, and at the very least knew how to hire very, very talented crew, because Jack Cardiff shoots the hell out of this fucking.
Yeah,
movie.
I mean, look, I was evangelizing earlier. Next of Kin with Patrick Swayze, another movie that I love that he's done, which is actually pretty easy to get to on streaming. Like, I think it's on HBO and stuff periodically. Awesome. But I think, like, to me, the big, draw and special thing about this movie, of course, though, is like these action sequences at the end. It's really, if you love this, like, you know, if that's what you live for, if that's what you come to a movie like this,
you love squibs and explosions.
Oh my god! And it works as payoff. A lot of movies, you know, like, not everybody is S. Craig Zoller. Not everybody can sit on that until the end of the movie, and, you know, and still have it be entertaining. And Zoller can, and Irvin can. Irvin he's special. He's a talent, and it's worth checking out.
He makes you wait for it, for sure. But yeah, pivoting towards reductive rating round here, this was surprisingly for me a solid 4. Considering that what I was looking at from a lot of people seemed to be, you know, this is kind of in 3-star territory for a lot of people. I thought this was a bit stronger than that. I think I went into it expecting it to be just like trashier than it ended up being.
You expected Red Scorpion.
Totally. Yeah. And I think even though there are some you know, flaws that we've noted, like, this is a 2-hour movie, and a lot of it, like, those flaws maybe harm what feels like 4 or 5 minutes of the runtime of the movie tops. Like, it's strange how good the rest of it is, how well it blends Irvin's feel for guys talking in rooms and making that interesting, how well it blends Frederick Forsyth's sense of actually doing authentic procedure and, like, actually researching this stuff, and at the very least giving you, you know, a movie microcosm of real things that you might see in the world, and having just enough handsome craftsmen to actually render that tradecraft in the form of this sort of like loose character study of this Black Ops operator, which I will also say, Christopher Walken, if you like him in The Deer Hunter, you will like him here. He is doing the same pale, skinny, hollowed out, like, what the fuck happened to me? He also gets tortured in a foreign country and comes home and gets fucked up. Tom Berenger is amazing as his action in The Juice. It is the Juice sort of comrade in arms who joins him. And yeah, I mean, at the very least, if you find the domestic novelistic stuff doesn't totally work for you, the last hour of this movie is very much like Oliver Stone, Jean-Pierre Melville, French Connection kind of like coup process, followed by a basically 15 to 20 minute long set piece of them doing a Bay of Pigs style raid. It looks spectacular, and again reminded me of something like that Alex Cox did with Walker when he gets to the fiery explosive stuff of that. And so it's definitely not as action packed as something like Dark of the Sun, if you're interested in like a really action packed, like ultra violent men on a mission movie, like full exploitation movie. But for toning that aspect down, the other stuff is so intelligently done that I was not actually annoyed by the fact that this was like slow, for example. I enjoyed the slowness. I'd enjoyed the deliberate nature of it. So 4 for me.
Yeah, I think I'm also going to go with the 4. I've been kind of going back and forth with it, but I think this conversation convinced me. I like the fact that it ends up being this slow procedural into a giant 20-minute finale. At first, I will say, given that it was Irvin and the only thing that I'd seen was Raw Deal, it did throw me for a loop for like a good half an hour. But after I just kind of sunk into it and sunk into the, I don't know, like honestly, the sadness of Walken's character. It's very like anti-Commando and anti-Rambo 2 in the sense that it's just about his like loneliness and kind of the ghost of a man that wishes he had a family life and a boring job instead of this wild life that he's created for himself. Like he has, what I like about Walken too, he's got these vampiric eyes they're hypnotizing and charming, but there's something about them that it's like they're not necessarily trustworthy, and I think that he uses that very
they're a little
well
piercing
here.
and uncanny at times.
Yeah, absolutely. One scene I don't know if we highlighted, but I loved it, was just when they get on the boat and they get to use all of the supplies that they've taken so long to acquire, and so they're just like ripping grenade launchers, Uzis just into the ocean. It's a blast. And watching them, like the first time their characters kind of light up as human beings is when they get all their weapons out. Having Berenger get killed by the mother as he's hooting and hollering, and having that one character kind of represent that 80s trash action that I was almost expecting from this the entire time, and then it being cut so short by the mother. And he even has that moment where he kind of looks at himself, or it seems like he's kind of having a struggle within for those first few seconds, where he just stops dead in his tracks, looks at what he's been doing, and then she kills him. I just think it's a great moment. And the last thing, which is just kind of funny, there's 2 strange connections in both of these movies. One is that there is a scene where one person looks at a penthouse and makes a comment. There's a kid in Bellman and True that has a penthouse like kind of comedic moment, and then there's the weird short shiv torture thing, because they do it with the syringe, and then we'll talk about it in Bellman and True, but they use like a box cutter, and it's kind of the same technique to just hurt someone a lot and not do too much damage so they can keep going. It's really just gross. So anyway, I just thought that was kind of interesting that both of those had that. But 4 out of 5.
For you, Noah.
I also go with 4 out of 5. For me, it's mostly for the reasons you said, Josh. Like, I think that it really lands pretty much everything except for like 5 to 6 minutes of the movie that are unfortunately kind of important parts. And I think in general, though, it's just like a hilarious, fun, exciting, and rich action movie, directed by a real pro and, helmed by a real bona fide movie star in his prime. And, you can't really ask for much more. So I encourage people to check it out. Dogs of War. I love it.
Yeah, please do. But yeah, that's going to wrap it up for Dogs of War. We're going to be right back, and we're going to be jumping 7 years later here to a British bank robbery film called Bellman and True. Stick around.
If he does come back, I don't want you to tell him anything you've heard.
Can we get out? You can't expect me to go in there. He's got the gun!
We definitely should talk more about it.
Yeah,
later.
we won't. We'll
I
let
mean,
you
no,
get to
actually, wait.
eventually
This is a
watching
great
one of
way
yours.
in to talking about how I found this movie.
Oh, hell yeah.
I mean, which is
Okay.
just that, like, I found Bellman and True through Indicator, through the Powerhouse Films Indicator series. And I just, like,
Shout
never
out
heard of it. The
Powerhouse
plot
Films
looked
Indicator.
interesting online. And it's probably it's in the top 2 or 3, like, movies I never would have watched or heard of had my acquisitive impulse, not gone in a good direction this time.
Yeah,
and
it's
I
a
bought the
very
thing.
underviewed film, it seems. Which, given also the fact that it's so well crafted and made, it seems. I don't know. I guess it was just lost somehow.
Yeah.
I'm not entirely.
Well,
sure
I want to
what
keep
that
you
story
guys.
is.
I want to keep you guys rolling. Or whatever.
Yeah, no, we'll use this, Jamie. Use it. We are now talking about Bellman and True. Welcome back, folks. It is the 1987 bank robbery thriller written and directed by Richard Loncraine, co-written by Michael Waring and Desmond Loudon, who was helping adapt his own 1975 novel, and starring Bernard Hill of Titanic and Lord of the Rings fame you might have seen before as a computer hacker named Hiller, who is bribed into helping a ruthless crew of bank robbers into obtaining bank security system details, and then for becoming the alarm man, becoming the bellman as part of their actual heist, and gets into all kinds of danger for him and his stepson, who he is trying to protect. This is a film made by another British filmmaker with an eclectic career in film and TV, same as the first film. Loncraine apparently originally wanted to be a sculptor before getting a job at the BBC in the 1970s and turning that into a directing career, where he did everything from a Mia Farrow starring gothic horror film called The Haunting of Julia, a weird thriller that sounds really interesting about that has Sting in it. It has something to do with like him like abusing some like a disabled girl in their family or something like that. It looks insane, called Brimstone and Treacle, and also a Berlin Film Fest winning Shakespeare adaptation of Richard III, as well as, oh my god, it's still going here actually, he did an episode of Band of Brothers, a 2004 Paul Bettany Kirsten Dunst tennis rom-com called Wimbledon.
I know that movie. That's funny.
Strange career, but smack dab in the middle of it is this 1987 crime thriller, a movie he got because it was produced by his colleague Michael Waring at the BBC, who he had worked with plenty of times before, and who wanted to turn this novel he really liked into a miniseries, actually, speaking of Tinker Tailor. So that was what he wanted to do. Eventually, it got shortened into a film as a project, but it had TV origins, and both of them agreed, as they said in an interview, that they just really liked that it was like you have to say this in like a British accent to fully appreciate it, but if it was like it's a good caper, it's a good yarn, they described it. And so they took it not just to the BBC, because that it eventually wasn't, it was going to go full film, so they took it to, as Noah already highlighted at the very top of the show, to a production company called Handmade Films, which saw a lot of success with the Bob Hoskins crime films The Long Good Friday from 1980, Mona Lisa 1986, and which was founded and executive produced by George Harrison, which was detail I somehow missed when we did our episode on The Long Good Friday and Mona Lisa.
Oh, really?
But like his name came up in the credits as an executive producer.
Yeah,
so
that's
like,
the most special. That's the cool part about Handmade, is that it's Beatles, baby.
God damn, yeah, Beatles money going into getting some cool movies made. And so, I don't know, this movie definitely feels, especially in its second half, very much connected to the project that Handmade Films was doing in terms of British crime cinema that was, sturdy and handsome, and was based on, similarly to a TV miniseries or a novel, like good character work and writing. Definitely has like a neo-noir quality based around a criminal job, has a rock solid, tensely procedural view of actually eventually pulling that job off. And very similarly, I'll say, to Mona Lisa, less so Long Good Friday, because that movie has a really dark, like, gangster movie violence and existentialism to it. This one for me has more of that Mona Lisa like attempt at like a romantic quality or like a sweet quality of like people who find themselves in situations like these and try to retain their humanity or care for other people in some capacity, which in this film is the relationship between this computer programmer and his surrogate son, who he or stepson, I guess technically, but yeah, it's played as like he needs to earn this relationship, or like the son needs to, it's dramatically cathartically wrapped around. They are not that close at the beginning of the film. By the end of the film, they are truly father and son, and like that's kind of, you know, the main arc of the movie, outside of the fact that this guy is just a middle-class, middle-aged computer programmer who gets involved in a pretty intense crime.
Yeah. And it's interesting that they call the son, for instance, he's called the boy the entire time. And they have a lot of this film has a very strange way of telling you how these people know each other and what their relationships really are.
I really thought his name was going to be True by the end of the movie because he's the bellman. He's obviously the bellman. He ends up becoming the guy. And I was like, True is the kid, right? Like that's, and I don't know. Didn't deliver.
I thought there was going to be some type of just more revelations in that sense. But I kind of like that there's this mystery surrounding it. And it feels more like you kind of get jumped into this situation with Hiller, and you're in the midst of it as he's trying to escape the circumstances. And it's not your traditional way of going about this story. It feels like even in the beginning, he's getting off of a train and they already feel like they're on the run, and there's so much that's happened. It's like we're getting thrown into the second act. I love the drop frame slow motion and like that eerie twinkling score they got in the beginning, where it's just I'm just looking at a tired looking, like middle-aged, like professional. I don't really understand why this is as eerie as it is, and it just looks like it should be a scene of like a father and son getting off the train and carrying their suitcases to the taxi so that they can go home after whatever trip they were just on. But it does take on this quality of, you know, you see the ominous British guy blasting EDM in his headphones who's like following them around. And I will say Bernard Hill too has kind of like a Gene Hackman in the Conversation vibe kind of going on. Sick mustache, drinking, smoking problems, sad, heartbroken a little bit, which we'll find out the details of kind of later. And you know what, Noah? You are very true to, I feel like I can kind of tell when I am going to watch a Noah movie now. This reminded me so much of the first movie you ever showed us, which was, I'm pretty sure, The Whistleblower, the Michael Caine movie.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
There was a similar vibe I got. I was trying to compare it to other
British movies. They're from about the same time. You know, maybe there are more similarities. I mean, to me, it's a movie that, like as a screenwriting feat, I'm very intrigued by what it's going for, which is that it's really trying to fuse this incredibly personal story about like a father, a stepson. They're in a difficult position, and they're in a doubly difficult position because of what the father's gotten them into, and because the mother has like left the picture. And so that is then kind of grafted onto, okay, well, part of the reason the way the father fucked up is that he's an alcoholic, and now he's in hock to these gangsters who are doing a bank heist. And if he's going to live, and if the son is going to live, then the father has to help them with the bank heist. The way I like to imagine it, right, is that basically Jonathan Glazer saw this movie and was like, wow, that's a crazy heist. What if we made this like the heist that Gal comes back for at like the end of Sexy Beast? Like there is this like very like, to me, this like you know, it's like he decided to do the, like, you know, if like the adage is like get in late,
but it's underwater,
get out early. Yeah, exactly. Like if the adage is like get in late, get out early. Jonathan Glazer saw this and was like, no, I just want to do like the earliest part of that, everything up to when, you know, like when he comes back or whatever. Like, because it feels like fundamentally that like this movie is about that same thing, that like this guy has to do this job and he's getting strong-armed to do it. He doesn't want to do it. And like, just like Sexy Beast, you feel that pressure from like the very like in this movie, you feel it from the beginning. And in Sexy Beast, it's like from when Don Logan, when Ben Kingsley shows up. And now, like, okay, so you've got like this like really high intensity criminal thing, and there's like two hoods, one, you know, posh and one rough, who are essentially, you know, pressing him and calling him old boy and stuff. And they're like, you've got that element, like that kind of, you know, like proto Guy Ritchie thing, alongside this very personal drama. And the personal drama is like very sentimental. It has at moments it's a little bit boring, but at other moments it actually feels to me like this. It feels like it's telling a very emotional story about what it felt like to be a middle-class British person in the 1980s, which was to feel totally abandoned, to feel like socially unmoored. And Bernard Hill, the most famous role that he had prior to that movie was being the lead actor in a British TV series called The Boys from Blackstuff that is about more than anything else, like the experience of like grinding poverty in the UK. And while this is like a middle class story, like if you know, like it's about like a, you know, like an emotional place that I think most of Thatcherite England resided in. It is like about the, like that feeling of like the pressure and like being squeezed. And to me, that is just like, it makes it so like interesting and almost like at moments like squalid. In addition to being like hyper emotional of like a heist movie. And it's like, it's complex, you know, it plods it sometimes, I'll grant it, but like, it's just like for a fucking bank robber movie, like what the hell? Like how did like, it's a little audacious, I must admit.
Yeah, I also love the there's something about how I mean, I guess I feel like we say this every time we cover a British movie, but it is very British in the sense that it even feels like the gangsters are incredibly polite the way that they articulate themselves. There's something about the way the movie opens with I think the music's by Colin Towns. Josh, you were mentioning it's got a classical feel, but it's dark and mysterious in tone, and that also kind of represents the first kind of head gangster that we see, where one of the things he says before he starts just slightly jabbing him with a box cutter is like, "We don't want to have a very ugly, do we?" Something like that. And it just feels much more a polite way of going about taunting somebody as you're torturing them for information or something that they did wrong or what have you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of the more interesting choices that the movie makes is that it's focused on a middle-aged, middle-class computer programmer as its protagonist. Bernard Hill, I think, is a fantastic, like, is doing a real, like, set, like, if there's any qualities that, like, scenes for me where I'm like, oh, the scene with the kid is going on pretty long, but when you look at Bernard Hill and you see the history in his eyes and you see him grabbing at the bottle and stuff like that, there's qualities that he's giving it in his performance that I think are making you feel the sort of some of the impact that I think and history that you were trying to bring up there, Noah. But it also makes a really interesting dynamic for the film, because I also think that these guys, you know, they are some pretty rough gangsters, especially some of the ones we're introduced to a little later, we'll say, like the guy who works at the butcher at the meat factory or whatever, but who is more like a Long Good Friday kind of character. Yeah. But like, I think as a result of who he is as a person, it's also why they kind of treat him that way. Like, he's an unusual protagonist in this kind of milieu, in this environment. And I think that that's also part of why the tone that it has. And it's why the tone is a bit weird and a bit unique. And I think it's a quality that people will either like, or it'll be something that maybe you'd like, I wanted a little bit more like dark British gangster shit. But like this guy being just kind of like an average Joe guy in this more intense system, and like what they're threatening him and all of this, like with violence, you know, implicitly. But it's like, I don't think for a moment you kind of go, well, he's gonna go like John Wick on their ass, or he's a trained professional in criminal situations. And he's not. He's in over his head, and that does actually have a bit of a existential quality for this character. His skills are really like improvisation. You know, he's engineering, which we do see him use in the finale. Yeah.
But the other piece of it, right, is like, what are his exceptional qualities? And so one of the his relationship with the stepson is that like the illusions that get set up are that the kid's mom like ran out on them. And he is like kind of irresponsible in how he's like tried to raise the kid, but that like the content in like, you know, like the facts of the kid's life, but the content of their relationship is like, you know, it's very based on like wordplay and like these kind of rhyming associative banter that like at first it's like, all right, this is a little bit precious. But I think it is ultimately written with like this kind of, it reminds you of almost like Cockney slang in that it's like a lot of like associative meaning. And one of the more like annoying ways, I mean, like unsubtle, I should say, ways in which he does it is by like stories that he tells the kid. When in fact, I think like the screenplay works best when they do this kind of like, private banter between them, and it's not in like the story world. It's just that like this guy, he thinks, and then he describes at a separate point, he describes coding and the process of coding as being similar, as relying or hacking in some ways, and like cracking passwords is like relying on these like kind of associative logics. And so like there is like a cohesiveness to what like this character is and what he's trying to teach the boy to be that like makes sense. Like I feel like this sense of like this engineer's mind and how he's trying to raise the boy. And it's like a bit of a paternalistic fantasy, like it's, like the dad ruffling the kid's hair and all that kind of shit.
Yeah. But I almost feel like he's trying to balance that with the stories and the way he speaks to his son. He's trying to balance the practical mindset with his and distancing his son from this circumstance that he's put himself in
your mom didn't leave us and abandon us. Your mom is a princess who's also a secret agent who's doing important work around the world.
Like the kid is clearly hip that this is actually like a symbolic thing about the mom.
Yes.
But like he doesn't this is to the movie's credit. It writes the kid really well because the kid does not himself make that connection until very late in the movie in a conscious way, in which he then uses it to in a little too blunt and sentimental of a way, uses it to make a realization about the dad.
Kieran O'Brien is a child performance, but he actually became a fairly
when the movie came
British
out,
actor.
I was doing a bunch of like reading in the in like newspapers to like find out like how was this movie received at the time. Pretty mixed reviews. But there was an article. There were real articles in the Manchester Evening News and the Guardian, I guess. As well about Kieran O'Brien, who plays this kid, and how he won from an audition, etc. Because this was, I guess, at a time when child actor was a bit of a novelty. But his performance in this movie led to a TV career. The most recent thing of which is that he's in his 40s or 50s now. He was in Ted Lasso, so he's been in shit recently. But the kid is good.
Ted Lasso fans should look him up and go check out his
see if they
career.
recognize him, because I don't. But the other there is like a Spielberg quality to this, right? Like it's like it's like an adventure kind of thing going to it. Like tonally, this movie is in such a weird place. Like it ping pong.
That was what kind of rubbed me when I was watching it. I'm curious if I were to go back into this knowing more what it was, how I would feel about it a second time, more prepared for it. Because when I was watching it here, there was a quality where like the eerie mood I was intrigued by when it first started, and these guys are following them to the hotels, and we find out some of the details of like these guys are chasing after them. They're going to kidnap them. They take to this mysterious and massive rundown house that is a fantastic location or set or whatever the hell. It's massive, and we find out some of the details of the fact that he agreed with these gangsters that he was going to steal security system information out of the bank that he worked for, but instead we're picking up after he's already had cold feet, taken the first half of the money and tried to run away. And so basically they're back saying, hey, you're going to finish this job for us. We need you to finish this job because you gave us these discs and we can't decode them. This information is useless to us. So basically they were like strong arming him and threatening him and like, you're going to accept this job. You're going to decode this for us. And so immediately you kind of check into, well, this is a tense, stressful situation. This is very thrillery. And about an hour of the movie is him lounging around this house. At a certain point, he's going to decode this, and he does.
Yeah,
for sure. But like the tension, it's there. It's always present, and it's always lingering in some capacity.
Because
but
they will be violent if he doesn't do the job. But
totally, but it's not the focus of the movie.
Out.
Again, to your point, Jamie, that they're nice. They actually hire like a housekeeper and a babysitter so that it's not like violent guards.
Well, I would say like
they're failing miserably.
Two things happen that are kind of important, right? So like the first is that when he comes back, and you talked about this earlier when we were talking about Dogs of War, they punish Bernard Hill, and they cut him up in like the torso with a box cutter a bit, and it's like not really like they don't milk it, like, which I appreciate, but it is like pretty brutal, and it's like, oh wow, like, you know, this is how like you know, to how you described it earlier, it's vicious, it hurts a lot, but it also he can continue on with his work. And then the other thing though is that he's like, look, like I ran away, you know, the boy and I went to this cottage, but like, you know, I'm trying to take care of this boy, and like I can't do this job if you won't help me take care of the boy. So their solution to that is they take Bernard Hill to a bordello, like a brothel, and they're like, yes, okay, how does this, you know, this is like a woman, like how does she seem? And he's like, give me the other one, the surlier, slightly prettier one who is in the back and I guess has her own daughter. And so then this woman, the prostitute, and her daughter are recruited to move into the hideout where they're planning this heist. And so that is like also developing as this goes on, is then like, all right, there's this woman and she's like very standoffish. She is like very cold, even though she's like kind of keeping house. Like she's been thrust into this like role of homemaker. And it's a bit uncomfortable.
This was the subplot of the movie where I kind of knew every beat of it, where I was like, yeah, you know, they're going to get involved with each other in some capacity. He's going to be like, there's a mom who's missing from the life. Maybe she could replace it. Maybe the two kids could connect in some way. Maybe at some point Bernard Hill and her
but this is where I
get together in some capacity. And eventually, obviously, it doesn't completely follow through on that arc. It does get more interesting by the end of it. But I will say there were parts of this when we were doing this instead of the mission stuff where I was kind of going, this is all being part of like a sentimental found family, people surviving through these tough conditions that they're in kind of aspect.
And, you know, there's like a couple moments where it's like, of course, like somebody tries to escape. There's a faux hostage situation, you know, thing. There's also a moment where, you know, like there are all these like emotional beats, none of these things that seem to advance the story that dramatically. But then the big one on that front that does is shortly before the heist, when Hill is out doing something, the boy overhears the woman who is in bed with another woman who is taken to be her like real lover. And they're talking about how this woman plans to essentially like, you know, rip off Bernard Hill and run away with his share or something. And
dastardly lesbian prostitutes.
And then the boy overhears this. He makes a noise. She bursts out. She yells at him, then realizes like, oh, he's heard everything. And she like makes him touch her boob. And so she sexually abuses him to get him to shut up. And it's like a little like
insane.
I was confused by that part. Yeah,
I mean, look, it's like a character who until this moment has been represented as like pretty much nothing but sympathetically is like all of a sudden it's like, whoa, wait a minute, what? There's a darkness here.
It definitely made her a more like fleshed out, interesting character.
Well, and it makes it like what happens. So then like the heist, like we'll come back to this. Just like know that like at the point of the heist, right? Like they are hilarious.
You know, we got a lot of pre-heist, Noah. You're skipping. You're just like get straight to the heist.
It's like
you're like me watching the movie.
I mean, it's like there's all these different things that happen, and like they contribute to an atmosphere that I overall think is like good. But it's like story wise, like, you know, like the next things that happen really just have to do with like the bosses that they recruit in. Like that's the only other pre-heist thing that's really major, right?
Noah, you are forgetting the really extended scene where he builds a little robot toy for the kid and they play with it, which you think is just like a really long sentimental scene. You're like, why is this in here? This was like trim for pacing so that you can, and then you realize later on that this actually is included for a deliberate reason, that he is going to make robot gadgets later in the film as part of the heist.
And
I think he even uses one of the toys. It's like the boat, and uses one of the motors in it.
Yeah, no, he borrows. It's like, not the and the remote control. No, he does like they make this guy out to be like he is again. This is where it's like a Thatcherite thing of like, don't you remember when your dad used to play with you and like do stuff with like his hands because he was like a guy who worked? Like, remember how like, so this movie comes out like around the time that like, let's say like The Simpsons is debuting, right? Like The Simpsons is a fantasy about what kids who grew up in the 60s and 70s thought their parents were like. So in reality, Homer Simpson is not a portrayal of people of his era. He's a portrayal of the parents of the writers. And like that to me is a little bit what like Bernard Hill is here, right? Like he's doing this like it's like he's a fantasy of what like the people this like what people wanted their dads to be like a generation earlier when instead they were drinking too much, you know? Like why didn't you just build robots with me? Why did you hit the fucking bottle so much? And that this character literally is that duality like represented in one guy who hits the bottle and also makes the cool robots.
Yeah. And also does a sick heist though.
Yeah, and he also has this weird balance where like there's one scene where one of the gangsters is looking after the kid before they get the prostitute nanny, and he's pissing him off because he says he wants new toys and he's bored with them, and he tells him to shut up. So the guy takes out a knife and starts threatening him with it and everything. And there is a moment, of course, where the dad, you know, consoles him and comforts him. But it also feels like there's not really a moment where he feels like he's really standing up for him or anything like that. And even when the son gets emotional and says something like, "I'll kill that man," you know, he tells him, he's like, "You mustn't say things like that," and trying to really just, I understand the de-escalation of it, but it's just, it also feels like there's a little bit of, you know, cowardice from the father as well as
again, I think that's just him. He's not one of these guys, right? Like when he gets in the room, when they recruit him and they're basically like, you know, you got the governor character played by Derek Newark. You got the original Bellman played by Peter Howell, who I was stoked to see because we just talked about him as the Borstal governor in Scum. He's fucking evil in that movie.
I love the way he just delivers his lines in general.
The close-ups on his face and the white hair, it's crazy.
Yeah, soft-spoken articulation, but he's so devilish. It's great.
And I love that he replaces his position because he just knows the bank security. They realize they need a bellman or an alarm guy who knows the bank security system better than this guy does. So they need him actually on the ground. And so they throw him into the crew with the Peterman, with the wheelman, all of these, you know, British slang terms for guys who were part of this crew. And that is kind of when the movie becomes the full-on heist movie in earnest. And it's interesting because, speaking to your point, Noah, about this kind of being like a dad fantasy component, or a bit of a child's fantasy as well, but like the idea of like the professional doing a good job like as part of this and actually being a contributing member of this squad, and eventually, of course, like being scared and being stressed while he's doing a lot of it, and eventually using that and being the guy who comes out on top, obviously using his intelligence and using his engineering and the planning and all of this. And it's just, it's a cool setup for the second hour of the movie, because you get at least about a half hour that is literally just Rafifi, Le Cercle Rouge, The Asphalt Jungle, all these kind of movies you want to name. Like it's just nuts and bolts how they pull off this heist. And it sets up that this guy is gaining more confidence in this field. Well, so, and with these guys.
This is the like the tagline of this movie when it appeared in advertisements and posters is like let me find it. It's actually like, because it is like a really kind of, I found like very telling way of describing it.
Is it they kidnapped his son, they forced him to steal $14 million, then they made their biggest mistake, they trusted him.
And it's like for the first 2/3 of this movie, you're like, what the fuck are they talking about? Like, this guy's a weak blanket. like what the, like what, who cares? And then eventually like the heist happens and he does every part of his job admirably. So we see that, like, you know, I mean, like, well, so before we get to the heist
is also sick. Yeah, I want to say,
before we get to the heist, we got introduced.
The heist is sick.
The last part before the heist is like the butcher and like
the governor. So basically, like, we learned that the two guys who are like forcing him to like get the codes to break into the bank or whatever, that these guys are essentially like flunkies, and that they have to go to like the heavies to like get the guys for the job. And this is where the name of the movie comes from, Bellman and True. So the governor, who like works in a meat packing plant, he like gathers like the criminal counsel and essentially like makes Bernard Hill like explain, okay, like what is, like, how can you control for the alarm system? And he has his bellman there. And the phrase Bellman and True comes from a hunting song, like an old like British, like, which is now like a nursery rhyme basically. And Bellman John
and True
Peel
are two, do you ken John Peel? And Bellman and True are the names of his dogs, his hunting dogs. So the Bellman is like a dog, essentially. I mean, it's like a very like arch, or not arch, wrong word. It's a very
very writerly.
Exactly. And it's also like, it's like the language between the kid and the grown-up.
You can tell this is a novelist adapting their own book because there's so many details to this that a screenwriter would normally be like, okay, we are going to streamline.
Well, and also
this is a novelist attached to some of their specificity.
And in this
that
case,
bleeds
I
into
also
this.
think it's like, it's meant to be this reflection too of like the way in which Bernard Hill talks to the kid. Like that specific shared banter they have, this associative language. And so like Bellman and True, it's literally just like Bellman, alarm guy, links up with the Bellman of this song, and the alarm guy is this like frankly Jimmy Savile slightly looking figure, not in dress, just in like he's like old, has a pinched face, white hair, and they like essentially give the blessing and are like, all right, like we'll do the job, we'll back you. And the governor will lead the crew himself. This like beefly Uncle Vernon from Harry Potter looking guy. And then, like they're off. And then it is from this point that the movie becomes like something pretty different.
Yeah, it's basically a crime thriller sequence at this point that goes through every single part of the process, and even throws in the personality. Like I love I think this is the butcher, correct? The one that is kind of running the ship, and right as they get to the place, he's like, "Don't ruin my reputation, and let's actually get into the bank before we get caught," because somebody presents themselves in a certain way that seems obvious in the moment. And I don't know. There's something about his attitude about it that felt very much like he's
also
skilled.
the one that puts a shotgun to the back of his head until he agrees to do the job after he's done the scoping out of the bank for him, where he has that great line to where he's like, try not to behave like Michael Caine, act natural.
Yeah. Yes. And I love Loncraine's decision to, when they pull over, they show from
he holds
the camera,
that shot to the overpass.
Yeah, and they go all the way to the bridge so that you can see that no one else can see it. And then there's just big close up as he's holding his face, and it just looks so uncomfortable, and obviously would be. But yeah, it's a very. It
reminded me a lot of Robbie Mueller's shit in To Live and Die in L.A., where it's like these like, and this movie has a lot of that to me in it, in terms of like some of the when the intensity picks up, but the thing that I like most love about this like early heist stuff is that it like we don't know the plan, right? So which is one of the it's one of the great like jokes of the Ocean's 11 movies, right? Is like they're always making these like they have these little names for the shit they do, and like we get little dribs and drabs. Like there's a remote control thing.
It's an hour of making plans, and you don't actually know any of it by the time it hits. But when it hits, you're like, oh, this is sick.
And that's kind of what's going on here. So it turns out like, what are the robots? Well, the robots are actually hidden in the base of like the smoking, the ash, like the ashtrays, I think, or it's like the things that like they used to have like the line, like they used to illustrate like where you stand in line.
My favorite thing when I go into the bank, the ashtrays that are just still there.
Well, and so he uses it to like he moves them to get around
he sets off the motion sensor
that's
alarm.
it. And so it's like to get the police to come over and over again. And so by
to the point where they just say, fuck it, we're not coming anymore.
Well, no. The other way around. They're like, well, guess we have to stay here all night. By which time, because they've sequenced their entrance into toward the vault, which is like below a bunch of levels and and is soundproofed, by which time they've gotten to that area, like the cops are above ground, but they're just like chilling there, being like, all right, we'll just stay put. And then these guys get to work, and they get to work by doing essentially the thief thing with the lance.
Yeah, they literally whip out like the thermal lance that Jimmy Kahn uses, get into the steel vault and all of that. But I just love the fact that it's like they show you everything. It's putting on the gloves, it's cutting the fences, it's like digging the guys who are digging the tunnel
like the cop
that they're
shit.
Go into.
It repeats like 3 times.
It is. It was the moment where some of the drier aspect of the filmmaking made a lot more sense to me, because it did feel like, oh, this feels like the novelistic authenticity detail is really paying off. Because who would give you we're going to fidget with every cable. We're going to show you how we get into the security. We're going to show you how many different times we use this little like RC car robot thing. We're going to get the timing right to cut these locks so that we can test these elevator keys to get into the basement vault. And I was like, this is stuff that I love. And I think that the filmmaking, as a result, the craft of it, just the actual pace and tension and the visual exploring of the space, and the fact that you have all these sweaty British gentlemen navigating it and cross-cutting it with the guards who are noticing some of the minor moments of suspicious behavior, like that's where the tension actually comes through, like the minutia of it, let alone some of the more extreme moments when it gets to them, which completely took me by surprise because of the rest of the movie. Like the really grossly violent detail of the one guy getting nearly torn in half by the elevator shaft, essentially, and bleeding everywhere. And then a part where when they take off in the getaway car, there's this really bizarre detail where the getaway driver like keeps trying to push through like a really tight like spot between a sort of like a dirt alley that he can't get through, and he keeps trying to, and it's just for about 30 seconds it's just engine roaring and metal scraping, and like I was like, some of these details really endeared me to the movie that they were in here.
That part makes you feel like he's just completely frantic and he's maybe trapped himself in a corner, and that's it. I love the desperation of that. It feels as if there's nothing else.
I love the guy doing the math. It doesn't fit, and he's like, I'm gonna fucking make it fit, bro.
Physics, it's not gonna fit. Yeah, it's a great line. I also like the shots when they're in the elevator, and that part happens when the guy gets trapped between the shaft and where they're just standing. They have a couple shots where they have the walls smeared with blood and it's dripping down. Well, and there is something about it that's so gross, shocking and visceral, because none of the film has any of that really.
Well, so this is where it's like, I think that the movie has like, it begins to have like a more interesting and becomes a more complex movie with like the moment when one of the prostitute who's recruited to be the like babysitter, I forget the character's name, Anna
Salto, I believe.
Oh, Salto. No, Anna. Anna, like he's
talking about the prostitute, not the guard.
Guy.
You guys were you're both right. Those are the names of the two people you were just talking about, different people.
So when Anna shows up though, like, and does the intimidates the boy and like tries to like get him to shut up by like having him like touch her breast to be like, this will be our secret, whatever. Like a tone, there is like a darkness that gets injected that is like kind of only hinted at in the movie. Like it doesn't really ever go there before, and then it's there. And then all of a sudden,
because the other stuff before it is sweet, like him chatting with her daughter or like recalling some of the family time,
and not just with her specifically. Like tonally, I think it's like it's the first like kind of like a darker, seamier beat in the movie, and then you get to the next thing, in this next like really awful beat, which is this guy who has been like there are the two hoods who are watching over them. One is rough and one is like posh. This is the rough guy. And the rough guy's legs get trapped between the elevator and the wall. And as you say, like, it's this really awful moment. His legs look really fucked up. There's blood everywhere. He's like convulsing and like slowly dying. And it's just like happening right next to them, and they can't move. And it's the governor, this beefy guy, and our main guy, Bernard Hill, who are just they're
he hands them the whiskey bottle or the scotch bottle and is like, here you go, man. Like just
do it. And so
sorry, they're all up there. So, and we're stuck down here. So we're just going to have to let this guy die and stay here for the night until we can put our gas masks on and gas our way out in the morning.
And eventually, like they, the gas. So like they get into the vault, they get the shit. They're ecstatic. And then, we're like, all right, how are they going to get out? And they do, as Josh says, they go the gas mask route. And this is like another great sequence, I thought. I was like I liked the shock of it, because we've essentially they do a really good job of having us spend a little bit of time with the police guards who have eventually shown up and who are posted on this top level that our main characters have to break through. And
no one believes the one guy, even though he says something's happening.
He's like, wait, I saw it. He sees something for a second and he's like, what?
He sees a glitch in the security camera, right?
Yes, exactly. And he's like, wait, what? And they're like, you're mental, mate. And then, elevator open.
And he's the one they make piss himself too, right? When they bring the shotgun up to him.
And he's crying. It's actually, even the stare, like there's a part where the camera pans down as if the guy holding the gun is also almost, it implies that he feels a little bad. It to me, at least, it seemed like the lingering of it seemed strange. That, or maybe it was intimidating him more. It's hard to tell with the way they're masked up, but
I mean, I felt that like,
this whole stretch of the movie is fantastic.
Like it's very high octane, and so they do it. And the other thing that happens is like they shoot, like they it's clear that like their instructions are like, don't shoot anybody, don't kill anybody, but somebody shoots someone, and so it's unclear though.
Classic heist movie problem. Goddamn, we just got upgraded to murder,
and so they don't know at this point. They don't know if they're there yet because they get in the car and they go. And the driver is like, he's at first, you're like, whoa, this guy's good. Like, this is like one of the drivers in Ron, and this guy's got moves. But then all of a sudden he gets very confused. Why? Because classic like problem, the neighborhood that they're driving through, more shit has been built since the last time he's been there. And all this stuff is there that wasn't there before. And so the dirt, like lots that he was expecting to be able to cross aren't there. And so the car, in like what is to me, one of the most like tense moments of the whole movie, the car gets jammed between like two garages.
Totally.
And it's like stuck. And he is jamming on the accelerator, and everyone is screaming, and they're like, and they're screaming. And essentially like he forces, just by way of wiggling the car through like these two buildings, and eventually, and it's, to me, like that, like wiggling is the crazy. It was like of that chase, it was the part that had me floored. And so the car is all fucked up, and you're thinking like,
I love that bit, and the bit where they get really mad at the guy who won't let them pass them. So they keep like honking the horn, being like, guy, let us through, until they nearly basically like get froggered by a bus filled with Christmas carolers, because this heist is taking place during the holiday season, mind you, too. So you can include it with your Silent Partner annual rewatch if you want.
It's a Christmas movie. It
there you go.
Yeah,
Christmas heist.
And
they also, I love the camera angle on that, because they do a little bit of a psych out, thinking they might actually get hit, where they show the side of both them beside the truck and them, and then it goes behind the bus that is heading towards them. And then at the very last second, they have the stunt driver go in between the gap, and it's pretty awesome. It's pretty action heavy in that moment.
Yeah,
and then
it's great. I really liked that specific 30 or 40 minute sequence was definitely for me the high point of the movie. And there's stuff still to like in this final 20 or 25 minutes as well, but it does revert back into the stuff where they were kind of hanging out in the house. Just that stuff is finally hitting its boiling point where something needs to be done about this. And so it's a lot of these characters, basically having conversations on how they're going to escape.
It's exactly because they get to this like safe house, which is like an abandoned little like beach bungalow thing just down the beach from
next to a nuclear power plant.
Exactly. It looks awesome. And so truly like one of my favorite, like I love this location work. And they get there and everybody's like, all right, like cop's dead, I hear it on the radio. We're going to get new passports for everybody. We're going to, we're going to get out of here. But secretly, of course, like the governor and the crooks are like, we're going to kill Bernard Hill and we're going to have the woman go with the boy. And everybody's kind of, and Bernard Hill is like not stupid. But
they don't tell him that. They try to pitch it to him as like, look, because you were an internal person who we hired who stole confident materials, we are more concerned about going anywhere with you, because if you get caught, we need you to actually have a new appearance and a new identity. They talk about getting him like plastic surgery or something like that. And so they basically go, you need to stay behind. We'll take your son and you can meet up with us later, which he is smart enough to interpret.
Everybody is like, it's extremely clear what's going on. So there's like this kind of funeral like feeling sequence where like,
yeah, he's not an idiot. They should have known the entire time.
And he's like,
he's smart.
He's like, tells the boy like, oh boy, I have to go. And then the boy is like has his moment.
There is a sweet moment with the boy.
It's when the boy realizes
like, now you're going away too.
He connects the stories that the dad has been telling him with like the real meaning, which is like, wait a minute, like every positive memory I've ever had is with you. It wasn't with like the mother whom I've idealized who abandoned me. And so it's like, you know, this incredibly, like, it's to me an earned heartstring pull because
stepdads, all you got to do is build your kid a robot and take him to the movies a couple of times.
I mean, it is
That's
like,
true, I think.
I like, it's really not far off.
That's
I gotta
fatherhood.
say, like, just like pay attention, be present. Christ, is it that hard? Anyway, so like the kid has this moment and everybody, it's like, wow. And so then he's like, fuck, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And so he, essentially as he
comes up with a pretty good plan.
As they start loading the cars, he's clearly done something in the back of the house, but like, you know, he's figured out something, but we don't know what it is. And he like says, you know, to the like woman and to the kid, like, you know, when it happened, and he said, no. And by this point, by the way, the posh original Hood, who's like arguing on Hill's behalf, this guy Salto, he has like totally come around against the governor and them. He's like, this is all going bad. Like, is it dishonorable to betray this guy, etc.? So he tells Salto, like, when it happens, like, get everybody in the car, you know, the women and the kid in the car.
And he's a criminal, but he's got a code.
Yeah, and he's like, get in the car and, you know, we'll go. And so then he, like, at the last moment, all of a sudden, Bernard Hill, like, runs back into the house and, like, everybody chases after him. And then he gets into the house and he kind of locks them and he sort of, like, tricks them into trying to bust into the back room where he set a bomb fuse using like a propane tank, and then he jumps out and the whole house explodes. And there's a very
it's a huge stunt explosion.
It's really astonishingly big. And then they go even further and they show you the charred body of one of the Hoods, and it looks a little bit like the mutated guy from RoboCop. Like it's a similar it was a very impressive piece of makeup work there. And Salto, old boy, is wounded, but the lady is like furious. She's like,
because one of the guys survives and starts like one of the guys who gets exploded actually like stumbles out of the fire with his gun and just starts shooting fucking like blindly and randomly. And I think he hits Sarto in the van who's trying to drive them all away. And there's a point where one of the kids gets like blood on them, and they were like, you've shot her, and he's like, it's not her, it's fucking
it's me.
like Sarto is bleeding all over her.
And so then like the woman's like, let me out. And so the woman gets out, and like Bernard Hill reveals like he knew her plan, that like he clearly like the boy told him, and she's like, well then why did you like to have me trust me anyway? And he's like, because like, you know, what if we made it work, you know, like all this stuff. And this is like where the movie like subverts the thing, because she just tells him the obvious. He's like, are you fucking stupid? Fuck you. Like fuck that. Like you're. I do like her line where she says, "I'm not the whore with the heart of gold." Yeah, like that is normally she just the makes trope it very they would clear that like here. He has like a fantasy and it's not going to work out. And this is like where the movie is like this kind of like, it's the you know, to me it feels like a little bit British, because basically they go and they give so the woman leaves, like she abandons them, she walks down the road, they take Salto to die with dignity by the sea, and they're like, all right, we're near the extraction point anyway though, so we'll be able to get out. And that is just not true. It's not happening for them. The extraction point plane goes away, and so they're like, what do we do? And Bernard Hill's
have all this money.
Like Bernard Hill's like, well, like we have this money that we got from the heist, and we, you know, and so they decide like, all right, so they go to the airport and they take like a bunch of money, not too much, but they take a bunch of money, and they have the fake passports because for some reason,
well, they think briefly about only taking his cut, and then the little boy kind of looks at him and he's like, and there's a little twinkle in his eye. He's like, we could take a little bit more.
And then it gets more intense though, where it's like, I mean, to me, the only real like plot lapse here is like, okay, so you're telling me that like these guys went to the trouble of making a passport for the person they were going to kill. So this kid, and like they have fake passports is the point. And so they get on a plane to go to like, I forget, I think Brazil.
Yeah, they're going to Brazil.
And they get in first class. And so it's 80s first class. So it means that like, it looks like they're in a nightclub. And the tension is, of course, like, you know, like the boy wants to go to the cockpit, and he's like, oh no, like, you know, he's paranoid, and they're like, no, we'll go up to the cockpit. Oh no, a pilot comes in.
Well, because
like,
he spends the whole time even going through the lobby and going through the gate and everything.
Every step, he's like, they're going to come for me. They're going to catch me. They're going to catch me.
He's thinking cops and staff and everyone, and everybody, and
it's like, oh no, the plane's delayed, and it's like, oh no, just because like they had to bring an organ transplant thing on board. Oh wait,
yeah, he just has an old-fashioned mentality about it. He's like, I'm a criminal and a murderer now, so it only makes sense that I get caught and arrested. But it's funny, the movie kind of goes the criminal can get away with it sometimes.
And so the movie gods say he gets away with it, and the plane takes off, and they're in the air, and it's a happy ending. And I think that like, because it's such a weird.
Don't worry, Dad. We'll make good without the princess.
It's like it's so like maudlin, but then also really dark and like really mean, and then like really funny.
Within like a few minutes of each other.
It's
the
nuts.
tone of this movie was so strange.
Like to me, it's like when we see a guy who we're used to seeing balance all that stuff do it right, like De Palma. It's like, okay, I get it. Like I think he has that kind of. This is a bit messier, a bit lumpy. But I love the final act so much. I think it's like a really special underseen thing, and I just love this like weird, lumpy fucking tone. Like it's a strange movie. I don't think anybody I know who's watched it, which is not many people, is at the end of it like, oh yeah, all that like made sense. But I do know that everybody I've shown it to feels like pretty entertained by it.
Totally, yeah. I was entertained by it.
Yeah, it does take a lot of tonal shifts. I mean, having that hour of setup with all of this character work and the buildup of the procedure into a heist, and then you have that explosion where it feels like, I think someone said it's like the Terminator or RoboCop villain comes out melting from the explosion and shooting at them.
He literally MacGyvers the bad guys, and then they like one of them turns into a Terminator.
Yeah, so it's fun in that way, but it does feel like a lot of the time you're like, I don't know what tone this is going to take next, and it's kind of exciting, but it does feel jarring in that way too.
And ultimately, it's all about found family, and they get away with it. So it's just that is true. I mean, extremes of this movie.
It is like, look, like this is one of the most. It's about family like movies like out there. Like I'm willing to concede that up front. However, it was made in the 1980s when people needed families more than a lot of other times because they were suffering because they had a lot of plight. I say only semi-ironically because I do think that this movie really is though about like. It is a middle class anxiety bank robbery.
British boys needed their dads to step up.
They did, dude. And this was the dad who did step up in the worst way by doing a bank robbery that directly threatened his son's life at like
by
5
being
different
really
times.
Good at computers,
right? Yeah, I mean,
he stumbled into being a good dad.
You know what? This really needs a double billing
and
with
blowing up.
This needs a double billing with Falling Down.
I can see it
because they're both fundamentally about like the
middle-aged professional resentment,
like the worst
a little
fathers,
bit,
one of which who ultimately is allowed redemption, and the other one who Joel Schumacher gave him what he rightfully deserved.
The British one's a little less racist, which I'm surprised to say.
Look, Falling Down is pretty close to a perfect movie for me. I feel like it's. Like,
I love Falling Down.
I feel like if stuff even sniffs it, that means it's pretty good.
Oh yeah. Have we even done Falling Down, Jamie? I don't think we have. Maybe we'll have to reserve that one for Noah later at some point.
That'd be fun.
We've covered Falling Down. That would be fun. But pivoting towards reductive rating around here on Bellman and True, though, I enjoyed this. This is actually going to get a solid to maybe even high 3 from me. I think the only reason I'm maybe holding off a little bit higher is because I was so taken aback at the journey I went on with my brain with this movie. There was part of me who, when I turned it on, I expected more of the patience and the Britishness because I looked this guy up and saw the other things that he had done. I also saw the title, which I'm going to be honest with them. I think if there's any reason this movie probably had a little trouble succeeding is they didn't call it like computer heist or something, or they called it Bellman. Like I see Bellman and True and I think of like, more of like the maudlin father and son, 90-minute drama or something like that. I don't think of a movie that has like a fucking Rafifi sequence or thief sequence in it, and so, I think if more people knew that about this movie, they'd probably check it out, and they should, because it is quite good. There's parts of the production value where I can kind of tell that this was like going to be a BBC miniseries at some point. There's parts of it, of the filmmaking craft, where I do go, there's like some made for TV thriller qualities, but it is pretty, and there are like really great locations and really great sets, and Bernard Hill is giving a really good performance, and there are details early on in the first hour where I did find it a little slow and a little dry, where the novelistic detail at least keeps it a little bit weird, where you're just like, like, man, what is this relationship with the child? What is this relationship with the prostitute? Why is, like, this is a weird dynamic, like a guy who's not normally in a heist movie. He's more in like, yeah, like a movie where he would be like a disenchanted or a disgruntled, just like heartbroken middle-aged man drama, is like dealing with these vicious gangster characters. Like that kind of throws you through a little bit of a tonal loop as well, especially because Bernard Hill is just so sweet and has sensitive eyes and like all these qualities about him. But it's so worth it for that break to the second half where they do completely transition the two qualities. He proves himself well in the heist. The heist sequence is as granular in terms of detail as you typically get in this kind of movie. And every little detail about his craft and about his intelligence and the way he, you know, thinks through a plan and executes it is actually used in this heist, and it's well done. And in typical heist movie fashion, it gets more violent. You have the elevator stuff, you have the gassing, you have the driving away. Like there's every single element of it, I think, as just a straight up 30-minute heist sequence in the middle of a movie. Perfect. It's exactly what you want out of it. And the finale for me gets weird. Weird as fuck, because again, it has a hard time bridging. Once it's out of the immediate tension of the heist sequence, it goes back to being like, we don't know how to quite blend these two films together, so how about he MacGyvers and blows up some gangsters and then has a heart-to-heart with the prostitute about found family. And I was like, okay, fair enough. But I don't know, British boys need dads, and this dad absolutely stepped up. That's all you can say about him. So I still had a pretty good time with it. So solid to maybe even high 3 for me.
Yeah, I think it's a strong 3 for me too. I do think that I had the same thing with kind of the tonal whiplash, and some of that did make me intrigued. I really wasn't sure what was going to happen next with the film. You know, you go from the first grounded hour into an incredibly detailed heist, into a loud, aggressive chase sequence, into a practical, violent vengeance, into a suspenseful, like, you can kind of call it like psychological suspense, even though it's pretty low key, just in terms of him sitting on a plane and just being worried about being arrested. But by that time, you do understand his paranoia, of course. And I did like the zoom in that they do, where the sound kind of gets more and more intense until it finally cuts out and relieves the tension. There's at least some craft there. But yeah, I'd almost want to rewatch this to see if all of those tonal changes work for me, knowing where it's going. I don't know if I was battling myself a little bit along the way. But yeah, I think Bernard Hill is fantastic. So is the boy Kieran O'Brien. I think both of them do a great job, particularly Bernard Hill, who is the focus. I do think that he brings some nuance to the character, and I like that there's a lot of kind of indescribable relationships, or at least there's a lot of implied past rather than it being shown to you. And that creates this kind of mystery where you feel like you get to know these characters, but only at a certain length, a certain level. And I did like that aspect of it. So yeah, strong 3 for now.
For me, it's a strong 4. I think
nice.
I feel, I like the psychology of it. I think that it's like a really valiant attempt to make like a weirder, more interesting kind of action movie. I would add that, like, I think sometimes it doesn't always work, but I'm reminded of, I found, or rather not reminded, but something that I found in reading about this movie was like the snippet from like an interview with one of the screenwriters in The Independent from 1987, the British newspaper, in which he says, quote, he tells them that he's coming under pressure from his American distributors to recut the existing version so as to remove the psychology from this quote unquote psychological thriller. And I don't think that this movie really is quite a psychological thriller. And there is a difference between the festival version and the theatrical cut. And the difference really is just some beats with the sun. And some, extraneous stuff outside. But like, to me, what feels kind of, I guess, like interesting in the psychology of it is that it does add like a depth to what I feel like is in the payoff and into the mental reality of the people who are, like really the main couple of people in this movie. And, it's, I mean, moving from that part of the portraiture, it's like, the middle of the movie set piece with the heist is just astonishing. And it really, like, it gets me going every time. I think it's just so exciting and so much fun. And I really love the explosion, like set piece, like reality, the glimpse of England into that time that we do get. And it feels like that movie tells a story about like a bunch of people in like a kind of place at a certain point in time. And that's often what I like most look for when I'm like looking at movies, particularly from like the 20th century, particularly genre movies, is what I feel like I can glean from their about their context from them. So
now, Noah, with you saying that, I have to have a very important question for you. Could I interest you at all in Richard Loncraine, same director, post in we'll say in the Bush era? He made a remake of this movie called Firewall, starring Harrison Ford as the programmer and Paul Bettany as the bad
he
guy.
remade this as like a really awful movie that I saw as a kid. That's so different.
It sounds like it. It has the exact, like, I'm looking at the log line. State of the art security system has cemented his reputation as a man who's thought of everything, but when a criminal finds a way into his personal life, you know, everything he holds dear is suddenly at stake.
Yeah, I mean,
man.
There are some differences, but it really does sound like he just remade this in a lot of ways. I mean, partly.
I'm just saying, it's a different time. It's got different, you know, maybe there's some, nobody I know likes this movie. No, it's not.
I saw it as a kid. Like, I loved everything as a kid, and I thought this stunk. Holy moly.
That's the true test. If you were a kid and you were like, nah, I saw through that bullshit. That's a problem. Well, I'm going to have to check it out because I never saw this, and I now have a mission to find out what Richard Loncraine was up to in 2006. But it's crazy that movie, because I'm looking at the list here of, dude, if you go to Richard Loncraine's Letterboxd, Firewall is his 5th most logged movie, and Bellman and True is just barely 14th. So this is a travesty.
That's wild.
People should be going out and checking out this movie. And you said it was Powerhouse Indicator put it out?
Yeah, so they have it on Region B. Otherwise, I know Jamie said that you could find it with a UK VPN on Prime. It used to be like there's a Canon or I think there was a VHS version of this or some rip that was like the one that was going around for a long time. But the proper restoration of it, I mean, it looks astonishing. It's a very pretty looking.
It does look good.
So if you can find it, I urge you to seek it out. And if you are if you listen to this podcast, if you are hearing this and you know somebody in a position to help make this movie more widely seen, I urge you to do so. It's crazy how few people have seen it relative to how good I think it is.
Agreed.
Totally agree. But yeah, that's going to wrap it up for Bellman and True. And for this week's episode, that was once again The Dogs of War from 1980 and Bellman and True from 1987. Thanks so much, Noah, for joining us and for bringing these films with you.
Yeah.
What is going on in Blowback world that people can
Blowback
look forward
land,
to? Was it, you said holiday season release, same as the holiday heist we were talking about?
Oh, yeah. Well, this year, the holiday heist is the deal that you can get on Blowback Podcast. No,
there you go.
So we a couple months ago we released our first mini series. It's entirely behind our paywall. It's for subscribers only. It's a mini series about the history of the U.S.-Israel relationship. And then we have coming out in December our season on Chile. It'll be around Christmas time.
Please tell me you guys are doing the Costa Gavras movie, right?
Missing. It's a terrific movie. We will definitely be talking about it in some venue. I'll definitely be. I'll have more to say on the case of Charles.
It's Jack Lemmon in the exact situation that you're so covering.
It's an incredible movie. He won Best Actor for a reason. So we have this Chile season coming out in December. It'll be terrific. And then, as ever, a bunch of other stuff that we're working on with an eye toward the future that I hopefully can talk about sometime soon.
Awesome.
Okay, and because it's a holiday season release, I will request that you highlight that Costa Gavras hired the guy who shot Christmas Evil to shoot Missing. Just a little tidbit for you to throw in there for all your listeners.
I love movies. I love movies
too.
What a great fact.
Right. Exactly.
You're in the right place. But please go and support the Blowback Boys and go check all that stuff out. If you aren't somehow, I'm assuming you all are. For our listeners, as Jamie alluded to, we're going to be back next week over on the Patreon feed, where we are going to be talking about dairy-related murder. We're going to be talking about Larry Cohen's The Stuff, so Killer Yogurt and Corporate Conspiracy. But we're going to be pairing it with a movie called The Ice Cream Man, which is where Clint Howard gets into the occasion, because you best believe he is the Ice Cream Man.
I can't wait for that.
A bizarre movie I'm excited to talk about next week over on the Patreon. And then in 2 weeks' time, we are going to be back with a special guest where we're going to be talking about the Hughes Brothers heist film, actually kind of connected to this here, Dead Presidents, which Jamie, I know that Jamie really likes, so I'm excited to finally check it out myself. And we're going to be pairing it with, I think, another blaxploitation movie here called Gordon's War.
Okay, I haven't heard of that one, I don't think.
I haven't seen that one, but I've seen that director's other movie, so I'm curious. So either way, that's what we're going to be back talking about over on the main feed, and I'll throw it in here just because we're here anyway. But in 3 weeks' time, it's your guys' fucking patron voted episode, and you best believe you were like, Seven Samurai, because you need to have us talk about 3.5 hour long movie, and you guys paired it with A Bug's Life.
Dude, I love this show.
I hope you're all proud of yourselves, is all I'm going to say about that.
That's crazy.
Because we're going to do it. We're not cowards. You guys voted it. It won, so we're going to do it. But goddamn.
Awesome.
Thank you. That's what we're going to be talking about on the Patreon later next month. So either way, that's all we've got for now. Thanks so much for listening, as always, and keep it sleazy.
Keep it sleazy, everybody.